chance to look at that.
There's, I don't think at the last meeting knew that. So in the debate, lots of people wanting to press it, and that's
And the camera's sort of swapping
cameras
around.
swinging around the room.
Actually, Councillor Atkins. Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Danish Said, the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's now 7, or it's just gone 7, so I would like to welcome you all to the meeting this evening. I would also like to welcome the members of the committee who are here this evening, other members who are in attendance, as well as council officers who will be assisting members throughout the evening. In addition, I would like to welcome any members of the public who are watching this, as we haven't got any here. Now, the way this meeting will work this evening will be that I, as chair, will be running the meeting and I will be inviting people to speak. I will allow every member of the committee who wishes to speak the opportunity to do so. So I'd ask members to wait their turn and not interrupt people when they are talking or comment on the contributions of others except during their own statement. I wish to stress that I wish this to be a courteous, polite meeting, even when we do not agree on things. As part of this, may I remind all members that in accordance with the Constitution, when I speak during debate, any member speaking at the time must stop speaking, and so must all others. Further, if any member persistently disregards my ruling as chair by behaving improperly, offensively, or by disrupting business, I may move for them not to be heard any further. Do members understand my wish for courtesy throughout the evening?
Yes.
We also have a few cabinet members and officers who I'll be inviting to address the committee tonight, and I would like to welcome them all this evening. I would also like to remind members that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that whilst we are here to look at a number of matters this evening, our debate and comments should not be adversarial in nature, either against cabinet members or any other members. We also need to be mindful of the requirements for respect when speaking or asking questions to officers in accordance with the member officer protocol. We are here to express our opinions on the merits or otherwise of the agenda items before us and try to come to a collective view. Failing that, a majority view. As I have said before in a different meeting, I would also ask members to bear in mind throughout the meeting the need for overview and scrutiny members to act as a critical friend to the Cabinet. We are here to try to make it, and therefore the Council overall, make better decisions, and we must do that in the spirit of friendship. When we have a decision to make on an item, even if it is just to note it, I intend to use the following procedure. I shall invite the relevant member, or where relevant, the officer to introduce the report. I will invite members of the committee to ask questions of that member or officer. I shall then invite members to express their views as part of the debate on the report. I would like to remind members that I shall give everyone who wishes to speak the chance to do so, but in accordance with the Council's rules of debate, you will only be allowed to speak once at the discussion stage. If you hear something said by someone else that you dislike or disagree with, you do not have the right to comment after they have spoken or interrupt them. Please say everything that you wish to say in your allocated time, which will be up to 5 minutes each. I shall then invite Councillor Foote as the Vice Chair to speak last and then briefly to sum up, to see if we have partial or total consensus. I will then ask him to propose a motion based on this, and I will seek a seconder for that motion, and the members of the committee will vote on it. That is the process for dealing with each agenda item, and if we keep to that, we can ensure that we will all have a chance to be heard in a polite, equal, and fair way. Right. First of all, I'd like to know if there's any apologies for this evening.
Chair, Adriana George, she was, apologies for her.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Lukey as well, I believe, Kay. Good. Yes.
A point of clarification. Obviously, as you know, overview and scrutiny is member-to-member scrutiny.
That's right.
So we are, as you've suggested, we'll be having officers here. Can we make sure that it's actually the members to members that is the bit we are scrutinizing? I don't want to be sat here scrutinizing officers. And I make no apologies for saying comments that might be adversarial to other people, but in my view, they're not. I am friendly with a lot of members who are here today. And therefore, if I do say something that I disagree with, it's not because I dislike them, but I think we should be allowed to disagree. And even if it comes across to somebody as impolite, that is the nature of disagreement. Sometimes some words do hurt, and I think that should be accepted in many of our conversations.
Absolutely. We are here. There are going to be disagreements. However, we can just be a little bit mindful that we're not overly rude. And a person's tone also sort of, says a lot. So I just would like everyone to be mindful of that. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't disagree, but in a decent way. Right, I would just like to confirm that we have full quorum this evening, so we can please proceed. Before that, are there any declarations of interest? Okay, and I would like everybody, all members, to make sure that they have seen the guidance note from the monitoring officer, which is included in the pack. Okay. Right, we are now coming to the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which was held on the 13th of July, 2021. May I ask members if they have any other corrections that they wish to propose? And this is for accuracy only. Yes, Councillor Biddulph.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm not sure that on page 7 at the top, that the bullet points are accurate. Victoria isn't here to correct me, but it says some cyclists were still using the carriageway eastbound. They're using it westbound and they're using the pavement, and we've always been consistent about that. So if that could be corrected.
Yeah, please note that.
On page 8, second paragraph, Councillor Lukey didn't, and I'm sorry he's not here either, because I shouldn't be speaking on him, but my recollection was that he asked for simple maps to be produced, not the complicated TfL maps that we had, and that the way the information was disseminated was more than lampposts. that it should be distributed in some other more imaginative ways. That was as I understood his comments. And then I think the other point is that is for the next stage, there's no mention of the discussion that we had that was so contentious. And whilst we don't want to draw attention to it hugely, I think it's not a fair representation of how the meeting went. And there does need to be an insertion there that says there was, I don't know, intense disagreement about vocabulary, and I mean, the word that was used was woke at the time. Otherwise, it just doesn't reflect what actually happened. Thank you.
Chair.
Sorry. Are there any matters arising from the minutes? I'd just like to remind you all that this is simply for clarification.
Yes, clarifications, Chair. On page 4, middle of the paragraph where we're talking about members express concern the residents could be worse off if moved onto universal credit. The one thing I think we've missed as scrutiny there is some proposed dates. Or is that just me being worrisome, or should we have some form of a date as to when people will be written to? Sorry, the paragraph before that, sorry, all residents will be written to with information about the new scheme. Now, if the new scheme is coming in 2022-23, could we as scrutiny have at least a date or some form of a indication as to when that written element will happen? If it has happened, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
Could we put that down that we seek for a
Yes.
date? Thank you.
Absolutely. Right, can we now all agree the minutes? Thank you. Right, well, if you look at your agenda, you will see that we were going to be starting off with supporting care leavers transitioning into adulthood, but we've had a change, and we will actually be starting off with Councillors Curran. I'm just trying to, the recovery update, please. So if I could please invite Councillor Curran, Sarah and Mandy, please. Item number 5.
Okay for me to go, Chair? Thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and hello to all members. So we've sent you some documents in advance, and we have a presentation that Sarah's going to present, and you've had a covering paper dated 16th of September 21. Hope everyone's got that, and then I'm happy to take questions after the presentation, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Hello, everybody. So my slides just sort of take us through and give a little bit more detail. Oh, just been reminded to tell you all who I am. I'm Sarah Philby, the Recovery and Renewal Programme Director. So if we could go to the first slide, please, Gary. Thank you. So Hounslow started thinking about recovery back in spring 2020, long before I joined, and recognised really early that that needed to be gradual, long-term and evidence-based. They've put together, before my time, a really bold and ambitious response in the form of the Borough Recovery Plan. It was developed in partnership. So 4 recovery task forces, community, economic, green, social and wellbeing, were established, and that involved partners. Convened a recovery programme board chaired by the leader. And that task force and that recovery programme board developed that evidence base, culminating in the Borough Conference in September 2020, and then the Borough Recovery Plan, which was agreed at Cabinet in October to build a fairer, greener, stronger borough. And within that, there were 4 foundation responses, as you can see up there: renewing local economies, tackling local inequalities, empowering local residents and reimagining local places. The council also recognised early that a transition to a low carbon Hounslow could support recovery. It would help address the challenges, build on the positives. Sorry, I should have said address the challenges of the pandemic there, which were, insecure employment and an economy overly reliant on certain industries. And the build on the positives, I've gone all over the place, I do apologise. It's nerve-wracking presenting to all of you lot. So, build on the positives of greater community connection, improved air quality and greater appreciation of parks and the environment, and the council's solid green foundations. Again, the Hounslow's Green Recovery, which went to Cabinet in January 2021, was developed in partnership through a series of iLabs, which brought in partners, academics, businesses, experts in the field, as well as the community. The recovery plan itself includes over 100 commitments across those 4 foundation responses I mentioned earlier, and it's a real range of activity in there. Interventions spanning different geographies, timescales, impact assessment strategies and service delivery. And in the boxes here, I've just given a flavour of some of the activities that have been taken forward, but within the papers distributed in advance, you'll have seen there's a lot more in there. And the Cabinet paper that went in September included an appendix which provided a brief update on all the commitments. So in order to deliver all those commitments, thanks Gary, we've established a recovery delivery board chaired by the Chief Exec to oversee delivery. That brings in council officers from across the council, and we're again drawing on the expertise of academics, external partners, businesses, in order to deliver the commitments in the plan. I've just drawn out a couple of initial areas of focus, and it'll make sense why I've drawn these out when we look at the stats on the next page, but particularly work around skills and employment, reopening our town centres, how Hounslow's recovery fits within our wider sub-regional activity, pan-London activity, but also nationally. We're obviously focused on Hounslow and our residents, but our recovery is intrinsically linked to our surrounding areas. And then lastly, and I'll touch on this at the end, how we use data and insight to shape our recovery narrative and understand the impact of our work. Next slide, please. So the latest economic data, you'll be very familiar with a lot of these stats. So more than 15,000 out-of-work residents claiming universal credit. Now, this is the latest July figures. They're provisional at this point. That figure has it's remained steady since February 2021. The next figure down, the 13,000 residents on furlough, that's been dropping consistently since February 2021. At its peak, that furlough figure was 56,000. I just wanted to flag as well the Office for Budget Responsibility projects unemployment will peak in Q4 2021. And then some other very recent data is around residents' earnings. Unfortunately, Hounslow has the lowest resident earnings out of all the London boroughs. And it's the 4th highest place for earnings, for workplace earnings, let me get this right, of all the outer London boroughs. Did I say outer twice there? Anyway, the key point here is there's a big gap between workplace earnings and residents' earnings. Now, that's unfortunately been a trend since pre-pandemic, but it's not got any better. And that's a big concern. We need to bridge that gap, make sure our residents are accessing the jobs in the borough, paying the bigger wages. So the skills and employment activity, which is captured in the reports you've received, we're doing a lot of work to enable residents to move into more secure, higher paid work. We've got additional employment advisors offering information, advice and guidance, signposting residents. We've extended and are extending our Skills Escalator service. Now, the Skills Escalator supports working residents on low household incomes and those recently unemployed or on furlough to get better paid, more stable employment. And that's through one-to-one personalised advice and access to skills training. There's broader training offer to enable our residents to access new and growing labour markets. We're particularly looking at our priority sectors, which I'll touch on the next slide, around digital, creative, and we've got an additional creative enterprise zone skills programme we're currently assessing the bids for, a construction training academy, which will be supporting 100 residents into work from September, and a green skills academy, the first phase of which is utilising that skills escalator model to train residents up to access new green jobs. And we're also looking to develop that, to develop more accredited courses in new green sectors, and links with our Hounslow businesses and Koala in the Lambton 360 group to create green jobs of our own. We do a lot of work around employer engagement and job brokerage, so signposting residents into jobs, and we're doing that across the age brackets. Those last 2 bullet points talk about activity particularly focused at young people, and making sure we're getting them into good, sustainable jobs for the long term. This next slide just talks about where those growth sectors are, so where we're focusing our attention. As I've mentioned, creative, within that information and communication sector, which is quite broad, it's particularly TV and film production and digital tech. I'll also highlight construction, because that's where there's an opportunity to really generate new green jobs. Green jobs, there's a huge spread of what they are, but particularly in relation to construction, we're looking at retrofit and energy efficiency. But there's real opportunities around low carbon transport as well. That operation and maintenance of green technologies. Who are all the people who are going to maintain our ground source heat pumps going forward, that kind of thing, and our EV charging points. Town centres. I've put this rather complex looking slide in just to show that there's a huge variation across our town centres. And that's the reason we're sort of developing really place-based programmes to support recovery. What you see here is a spread from January 2020, so pre-pandemic, up to July this year. And it's MasterCard transactions in retail across the 4 town centres. The top line in blue is Hounslow, orange line is Chiswick, the red line is Feltham, and the blue line is Brentford. Now, Hounslow, you are up above the level as it was back in January 2020. Chiswick is just below, and it's a sort of similar picture for Feltham and Brentford. I should caveat this just by saying that, of course, comparing July to January, you're not comparing like with like, but what it helpfully shows is the variation across the borough and also the upward trend that we've seen over the last little while with the easing of lockdown restrictions. What we've been doing to support our town centres to recover, and there's still a lot more to do. Nationally, retail spend is down. Footfall hasn't yet recovered to pre-pandemic levels. So lots of activity in this area. Coordination and communication, informing and signposting businesses, supporting businesses to move online. Lots of work around managing footfall and social distancing. And telling the story. Hopefully you'll have come across our Keep It Local campaign. That was all about keeping the Hounslow pound in Hounslow. We've had 100 new local suppliers sign up on our procurement portal. That's more than a 20% growth. We've had the Shop Safe and Shop Local campaigns, and most recently the Shop Local voucher scheme, which has been going really, really well. We've had 376 retailers sign up for that scheme, more than 7,000 redeemed vouchers, and that's approximately £10,000 worth of spend every day coming in, just under. I don't know if anyone saw it, but it did get a bit of coverage in the Evening Standard, and we had some really fantastic quotes in there about how brilliant it was. So that was really nice to see from an independent retailer in the borough. I'll just touch on briefly then how this links into the wider recovery work, sub-regionally, pan-London and nationally. So we're working very, very closely with West London Alliance colleagues and the West London Alliance Build and Recover Plan. Pulls out a lot of our key priorities areas in our recovery plan and the activity around that. We're working with West London Business to engage with the big corporate leaders who work across West London. At a London level, we've got the 9 Pan-London recovery missions, a recovery roadmap and an anchor institutions charter. And there's also a London economic recovery framework, which has been developed in conjunction with London councils and the GLA, and officers in Hounslow have been contributing to that as well to make sure that reflects our priorities locally. Nationally, we've been continuing to call for an aviation communities fund, recognising that the impact of Heathrow on our borough is substantial, or the downturn at Heathrow on our borough is substantial, and we really need longer term investment to support those communities who've been affected. We're also doing work with the UK Cities Climate Investment Commission in the run-up to COP26 around, again, building on that green recovery and how that can support broader recovery. And that's in conjunction with core cities, so that sort of Bristol, Glasgow, Manchester, so some other aviation communities in there as well. Lastly, I'll just touch on, the work we're doing to look at data and measure the impact we're having. A lot of these things are big systemic issues, so we need to look at systemic data alongside our own performance information. How much? Quality? And we're pulling all that together to inform how we take the recovery commitments forward and add new ones to them. And I think we're back on the agenda for Overview and Scrutiny Committee in March 2022, so when we can return to and really get under the skin of the impact that the interventions have had. So really, I just wanted to say there's a huge breadth of activity going on. I've just touched on a few bits of it. Hopefully it's given a helpful flavour, a lot more detail in the reports. And yes, we'll be coming back later in early next year, later in this financial year, to explore the impact.
Thank you, Ms. Philby.
Chair, just to say, when we first started on the recovery plan, developing that, we talked about a journey, and we're along that journey now. So we're at the delivery stage, and there's more to deliver. And then when we come back in March, we'll be able to explain to you what's been delivered, how that's impacted on the residents and businesses. And I think that's really important. But that doesn't mean that we stop thinking about new ideas or delivering new things between now and March. Quite the opposite, actually. The other thing to say, we've majored on jobs and skills. So I chair the West End Alliance Skills and Jobs Board, and I also sit on the Mayor's Skills and Jobs Board as well. So it's very important for us in houses. You've seen on the slides around jobs and skills, and that's across the whole gambit of people who live in the borough. So young or old, men or women, everyone needs help and support, and that's the message I've been giving to the West End Alliance, and those leaders understand that because they're affected in very similar ways because of Heathrow and the decline of the aviation industry, but also pushing very hard with the Mayor's office to make sure that they understand the importance of supporting the green recovery, and that's something, again, we've talked about in here. So, as I said before, Chair, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. I will be asking everybody if they want to ask questions, but I'd just like to remind everybody that this is a particularly important issue for Hounslow. The clinical and socio-economic impact of the pandemic remains, as we all know. We do continue, unfortunately, to be one of the hardest hit boroughs in London. We have 13,000 residents currently on furlough. Moreover, we were a significant contributor to the UK economy in 2019, and we want to ensure that Hounslow can continue to be an economically vibrant location. Members should note today that today's overview has provided us all an update onto what has actually been done, and the great thing to know is that we will be getting a second update in March. I will be now taking questions, and I will be doing this alphabetically. And you can address them to Councillor Curran or Ms. Philby or Ms. Skinner. Councillor Akinzadeh, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. As you have mentioned, we are, of course, going to a difficult times, but because the furlough scheme is not as it used to be, helping the employers a lot. Do we have any data that after that, is there, like, how much is in the increase in unemployment in our borough?
I think, Councillor, the furlough scheme is coming to an end, and it's been a tapered scheme, so we won't know the full effects of when at the end, until the end of COVID, and then to look at that data. And I think back in March we'll be able to come back with a fuller picture. But that doesn't mean that we can't share that information as soon as we've got it with the committee before March. I'm happy to do that.
Councillor Bidoff, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you, Chair. A few practical points, actually, first, before I turn to councillors and officers. It would have been very helpful to have had that briefing. We had the other briefings for the other subjects, and to go through that in detail beforehand. This paper is notable for the fact that it just gives links to papers online, and I think we need to be consistent with all subjects and have as much information as we can. So, what we got on this through the post is just a covering note, and it's not been very helpful. So if that could be noted for next time. There are some specific questions I'd just like to ask a few of Sarah first. When did you join?
I started in post at the end of February, Councillor Bidoff.
Okay, so this whole programme was fully decided, was it, before you came?
The recovery plan had been developed.
Yes.
As the leader just said, it is evolving. So all the commitments were obviously laid out, but as we're developing it, the Recovery Delivery Board and in conjunction with partners, we're identifying new opportunities and we're developing those as we go.
Okay, thanks. I can ask questions about the e-voucher scheme outside this meeting. It would be very useful to have a breakdown of the number of the 376, was it, businesses who've signed up, how many are in which of the 4 centres would be helpful to know. Ultimately, I think we should be looking at whether those vouchers are being spent on additional shopping so that it's a 2.3 million boost to the area rather than just being used for everyday shopping. The ideal would be people to spend it on something that they wouldn't have bought normally, having a treat or whatever. I accept that not everybody would be able to do that, but it would be useful if at the end to evaluate it by amount of benefit to the area.
Councillor Bidoff, may I just remind you that everybody's got 5 minutes,
yes,
please. Thank
yes,
you.
I'm aware of that. So I'd like to look more at the high streets point and to say that in Chiswick, which I'm talking about specifically, I recognise that this is borough-wide, moves have been made that have been very insensitive to local communities. And I would ask your department to think about that, please, before coming in. We've had everything thrown at us against the majority wish, and that's not conducive to good relations and good futures. So
Chair, could I just come in? Councillor Bidoff's just made a statement. I don't know if it was to me or to the office or to the committee. I haven't got a clue what she's talking about. Is she talking about LTNs and Sarkaway 9?
I'm talking about a whole host of things. We've had consultation, so-called consultation after review, after workshop, after whatever, on what our town should be like. I'm not talking about cycle lanes, no. I'm talking about the placemaking points. I am aware of this discussion and why we're having it and what the subjects are. All of that has been done in a way that has made the residents in Chiswick feel done to. And I'm just asking, very politely, if that could be borne in mind by the Recovery Board, that there needs to be some sensitivity. People have moved to an area because they like it. You might not like it, but they do. And that has to be borne in mind. So I would like the department, please, to think about recovery in context. And what might apply in one place may not apply across the board. There are huge divergences between our 4 town centres in any case, in their styles and who shops there and the sorts of provision that there is.
Councillor Curran?
Yeah, if I could, I'm still at a loss. We are either talking about LTNs or CW9, or are we not? Because
I haven't mentioned them at all.
I know you haven't.
No.
And you're always polite.
Okay, could we stop it
You're
there,
always
please?
polite. What I'm trying to ascertain, the question's been asked of officers and through me to provide an answer to a question we're not clear about. And the reason we're not clear about it, if you're saying that the voucher scheme is not welcomed by the residents in Chiswick, I can accept that and we can look at that. If you're saying that the skills escalator is not welcomed by the the residents in Chiswick. If you're saying that Kickstart's not welcome, I'm at a loss to understand what the residents you say in Chiswick are unhappy about the recovery plan.
That may be part of the problem. And perhaps we could have a meeting about understanding Chiswick if you don't understand it. There was a whole chart which talked about 4 centres, and that's what I'm referring to. And placemaking, there's a discussion in your slides, which I didn't have beforehand, about placemaking. And I would just putting down a marker, a serious marker, as a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to say that any moves to change any town centres need to be done sensitively and with consent. And that's my advice and recommendation as a member of Scrutiny.
Couldn't
So-
agree more, Chair.
So we would love that in
Thank you,
Chiswick.
Councillor
Thank you.
Bidoff.
And I haven't quite finished, sorry. I'd just like to ask who you're working with in terms of outside
30
organisations.
seconds left, please.
Simple question. I don't need any more seconds.
We've got a long list and we're happy to provide that list to the committee.
Could I ask if it includes the Chiswick Shops Task Force?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. That's, if you could please. There's a whole organisation set up in Chiswick in touch with more businesses that have signed up to the e-voucher scheme across the borough in Chiswick. If you could please take on board. It's run by 3 councillors at the moment, but with input from
Thank you, Councillor
trailers.
Bidoff. Time's up. I'd just like to say as well that papers have been provided as per council policy.
So it's a different policy for different sections. We've had huge presentations on the 2 other important, and not with this one. One other point, if you could just, this is a very serious one. I understand that we have to take things out of order sometimes, but actually there's a real flow through of these documents. And I found myself looking at care leavers and then thinking about obesity and then thinking about these 3 and wanting to tie them all together. There are ways in which the recovery plan can feed into our care leavers and the obesity programme. And the
I'd just
flow
like
for
to
me
say
is
that's-
just different.
That totally understand that, but sometimes circumstances
yes, I
happen, so
understand.
it's just
Yes.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Councillor Curran has
Yeah.
to leave.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I know, yeah.
Councillor Chowdhury, do you have a question?
Thank you. I just had one question, please, about just on the top on the slide, the skills and employment slide. So it just mentions the. So what I wanted to ask is the additional support that is being provided in terms of skills and employment. How is that being communicated to residents to make them aware of what is available to them, and also what the uptake has been?
Absolutely, Councillor Curran.
So I don't know if you've ever had a chance to look at the Work Hounslow website, but all of the information is held on there. We do a huge amount of comms, both on social media and more traditional forms. There's a lot of signposting with our partners, Job Centre Plus, CAB, etc. And another key element is our community solutions approach and that new model. We have an employment advisor embedded in that team and co-located as they're out and about in the borough, as well as training up that community solutions team. So whether they're getting face-to-face interactions with residents or calls through, that they can signpost appropriately. But I'd be happy to take that away and speak to the employment and skills team and come back to you with a bit more information if that was helpful.
Councillor Curran.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question because it was raised last week at the West End Alliance Skills and Jobs Board. So one of the things that you've heard of no wrong door, you might have heard of that expression, or one door. So what we're looking at with our partners, and there are many, is that so when anyone enters the system, if you like, whether it's through Heathrow Airport, whether it's through Seagrove, whether it's through the NHS, whether it's through the council, whoever it is, if they're part of that network, that those people will then passport those people on if they can't provide the information or the service that they require. So that it sounds very simplistic, but it's very difficult to get all of these private, public sector working together and understand, have one core mission is to get these people into work. And I think through the pandemic, I think we've seen a real shift of the private sector and the public sector coming together with one aim, and that is to, because it's in everyone's benefit, to get people back into work, into skilled jobs and being paid well. And that's really important as well, especially for those cohorts who we know were disproportionately affected by COVID. So that's young people under 25, women either under 25 or over 50. And you would have seen all the detailed work and statistics that come from Oxford Economics. So we know the real granular detail about who's affected. So having one door that people come in is vital. So I think it's a really good question about making sure that anyone, anywhere in the system can get support. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Councillor Mashisho?
Thank you very much. I want first, before I address, before I ask my question, the furlough scheme is coming to an end, and I think we need to look at it. Certainly our scrutiny, as it's been a lifeline for a lot of our young and old employed people in Hounslow. So I think we should be applauding that as a government scheme that has worked really well, and I know we're winning off it. But that is something that has been a massive boost and a positive for our community. But I feel that this current administration does not acknowledge that fully. But the committee, I hope, do. On the scrutiny of the presentation given, I want to ask Councillor Curran this. How many, we have something called a lifetime skills guarantee, which was announced by Boris Johnson in February this year. And in that, 11 million opportunities have been afforded countrywide, nationwide, with 95 million pounds backing. Where are our partners in Hounslow to actually provide this life skills guarantee in our borough?
Councillor Curran?
I've no idea. I presume you've got the answer to your question with you.
You're the leader in charge of the recovery. You should know about this.
I know exactly what my role is, and I know exactly what your role is. And what I'm saying is I don't know the answer. I presume you've got it with you.
Well, you're presenting something telling us that you are fully in charge of our recovery, and yet you don't know where our lifetime skills guarantee is coming from.
I don't know where the levelling up agenda is in Hounslow, as they don't know in Watford or in Dundee. So if you've got the answer, I would welcome that information. It'd be very helpful.
Chair, can we note that the leader does not know which provider?
Chair, we started this meeting and we're going back to
Sorry,
the old...
Chair, you're in charge of the meeting, Chair.
Can we
I'm
just
talking,
have
Chair,
courtesy,
if I
please?
may.
Right, Councillor Mashisho, if you don't mind.
We've had a very clear steer from you about this wasn't going to be adversarial. Straight away in, I've been asked a question. I've said I don't know the answer. I'd like to know the answer to that question.
Councillor
and now he's
Mashisho,
trying to
Councillor
make...
Curran was very
I've
clear
just-
about
and now
it.
he's
So.
trying
Chair,
to make...
like I've said,
He's talking over me. He's now trying to make cheap political points as per usual.
Chair, on point of order, that is not acceptable behaviour here. We have behaved with great decorum. Those responses, we've had two now, two different people, have not been appropriate and don't fit your briefing.
Well, maybe Councillor Curran felt that Councillor Mashisho was trying to score a cheap point. So can we just end it there, please?
Okay, so,
No.
sorry, Chair. Excuse me, you've given me 5 minutes. He has not answered a single question I've asked. Can I continue, please? Thank you.
Chair, he has got a name. I'm the leader of the council and I would like some respect.
Could you address Councillor Curran as the leader, or Councillor Curran,
Yes,
please?
may the minutes
Thank
please
you.
be presented that the leader of the council does not know where the life skills guarantee is placed in the London Borough of Hounslow. I can tell him.
Chair,
Chair,
he's gone back to the same point. I answered the question straight away. I don't know. I welcome the answer from Councillor Mashisho.
Councillor Curran has been quite clear in saying that he doesn't know. So can we leave it there, please?
So can I give him the answer?
If you have he doesn't know. So if you have a question, please ask it. Otherwise, we will go to Councillor Lal or something. If you have another question,
no,
no.
Chair, I would not have you treat me like this. I'm a
Treat you like
member.
what,
Yes,
Councillor
I'm a member
Moshisha?
of the scrutiny panel. I would not have you treat me like this.
Then-
Allow me the opportunity to scrutinize the leader of the council in the right way without you putting undue pressure on me. That is not fair.
Okay,
That is not fair.
Can I speak? I'm not putting pressure on you.
You are.
I am not. I am simply saying that Councillor Curran has stated more than once that he doesn't know the answer. And if you do, please give him the answer.
And I would like to continue to give the answer, which if you allow me to do, I would exactly do that.
If you ask
So
the question,
answer
yes.
to the answer for the leader of the council, which you should know, is the Hounslow Adult Community College. That's where the Lifetime Skills Guarantee facility is, and where we are producing, hopefully, the skills, the green skills that we've talked about, that we've seen in the presentation. And he should know that as leader of the council.
Thank you for the information.
Chair, again, he's using adversarial language. He's made a comment that I should know something. That's for you to decide, not him. That's for you to decide.
Have you finished, Councillor Moshisha?
I have.
Thank you. Councillor Lard, do you have any questions?
I'll give it a go. When I saw this report, it did say noting, and being members of Over and Scrutiny, I thought, well, how are we going to scrutinize this report? Because it's just for noting and it's a recovery update. And that's what it is. And I'm really saddened that certain members here are trying to politicize this report. The report itself, I have a question to it towards the end, but I did find the report in itself a useful reminder about the recovery to date and plan going forward after all the doom and gloom that we've been going through. The information for now is sufficient and it's concise enough to give us an overview. Clearly, at some stage in the future, and I think it's in March, we will have the opportunity as Over in Scrutiny perhaps to look at some of the outcomes and the targets that were set and what went wrong, what went well, etc. So that will allow us to do our job more effectively at that stage. At this point in time, I don't think there's much more to be said about this report. But like I said, I will give you a question. And my question's regarding an item on page 51, 11.5. Again, a very, very useful comment about ward-based data. And you can see from certain members here, they're more concerned about their locality than the overall borough. As an overview scrutiny committee, we're concerned for the entire borough. However, there is a little bit on the ward-based data, etc. So maybe when we have that report in March, a lot more information about ward-based data would be very, very useful to this committee as well as local councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Tuck? Sorry, did you want to speak, Councillor
Just
Curran?
to say that's a very useful point, and I'm glad you made the point quite rightly that we're looking at a recovery plan for the whole borough, not just Chiswick. And I will make sure
Chair, I
that...
have to intervene because I made it absolutely clear I talked about all four of our
Okay, can we
centres.
just leave it there?
All
Thank
four
you.
of them.
But what we will make sure, Councillor, is that there's granular information for all of the wards in all of the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Councillor Tuck?
Thank you, Chair. I have a clarification instead of a question. The presentation which the officers gave, it on slide 6, there were numbers given for people on universal credit claimants. It says greater than 15,000 out of work residents, and the chart shows around 40,000. So which one is correct? Are we saying greater than 15,000 is 40,000?
Could I answer that
Yeah,
one?
of course.
So universal credit you can claim when you're out of work, but also in work and on low pay. So the greater than 15,000, I forget the exact figure, I think it's 15,300 and something, is those who are out of work and claiming universal credit. The just under 40,000 that you see on the chart is total universal credit claimants. So that includes those in work but on low incomes.
So do we mean to say we have around 25,000 universal credit claimants who are in work but on low income.
Yes. At a very simplistic level, yes,
Yes.
because there are universal credit's quite complicated, but yes, that's.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tuck. Councillor Foote, do you have any questions?
Yes, Chair. I noted on one of the diagrams that was put up that the two very straight flat lines on one of them was for Feltham and Brentford, and very low down. I think the Feltham one is self-explanatory because of its proximity to Heathrow Airport and what is happening at Heathrow Airport with a very, very slow recovery. Is there any evidence as to what is causing the flat line in Brentford?
Ms Philby.
So to a certain extent, it's slightly distorted by the scale. To get all four of the town centres on there, you can't see sort of the variation in Brentford to the same degree. I think what we're seeing here is there's just a lot, and this is just one indicator I should also highlight. This is MasterCard transactions in retail. You know, there's lots of other metrics that we look at, but I was just looking for a graphic to give an indication. But it was low. This is suggesting pre-pandemic. It dipped, but not to the same degree as some of our other town centres because there's not perhaps the same number of retail opportunities, and it again has picked up again. Now that's one of the reasons we've got activity going on in Brentford around the digital dock, providing affordable workspace to bring people in, activate that to encourage retail spend, eating spend, etc. And the other development and renewal sites that councillors will be aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Curran.
Yeah, just to say, Richard, I'm sure knows that one side of the high street isn't there anymore, and it's been redeveloped, and that's been going on for the last nearly 2 years now. So that's one reason. And there has been, obviously, as every other high street has suffered a slow recovery. But what we'll do is make sure we've got the data simplified and make it easier to see visually when we've got the results by March of what those trends are really looking like.
Yeah, I think that the trends I was worried about was that the other ones show a dip and a very steep peak, whereas both Feltham and Brentford were just flatlined. And so, it looks like there's no change to the activity from the worst part of the economy and the best part. So it's worrying from that sense.
Chair, if I could just say anecdotally, I was in Feltham High Street yesterday, and it was much, much busier than Brentford High Street when I was in there in the afternoon. So, yeah, I'm helping to boost them anyway.
Thank you. Okay, I would carry on, Councillor Mashisha.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If we are talking about just, what's the word I'm looking for? If we're talking about just noting this report, could I ask, Chair, that in terms of noting this report, that we, as Scrutiny, ask the officers and the leader to work closely with Hounslow Adult Education Services on the lifetime skills guarantee, especially as we're looking to scale up our borough. In terms of a recovery plan, that needs to be part of that conversations, and that needs to be centered to that as well. So we need to be working with our partners a lot more closely, and that partner is the Adult Education Centre in Hounslow.
Thank you for your suggestion, Councillor Curran.
Yeah, it's a good point. I can assure Councillor Mashisha that higher education is represented on the South West London Skills and Jobs Board, and as it is on the Mayor's Skills and Jobs Board. So certainly we'll make sure we pick that up.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Councillor Bidoff, this is the last question of the evening, so we can get to the debate, please.
Thank you. Just going back to the high streets chart and picking up on Richard's point, I know you have to pick an indicator. Is there any socioeconomic link with MasterCard as a way of measuring things? Is it dependent on how much credit people have, for example? And is Chiswick a higher credit town than perhaps Feltham is? Is there a difference there?
The honest answer is I don't know. I'd have to take that away and look at it. We also look at footfall data and other Google mobility data. The MasterCard data is available, and it's one of those things where you want timely data, and it's actually quite hard to secure. But I think that's a very likely point. MasterCard is both debit and credit, but it could well be a reflection of the communities who are using those high streets.
It would be useful to have some other indicator just so we know what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to the discussion and what we've heard this evening. May I remind you that everyone who wishes to speak will have the chance to do so. The recommendations in this report can be found on page 48. And as everybody knows, they are for us to note the report. So we may want to comment on the implementation of the recovery plan. I would like to ask us once again to bear in mind our critical friend status and make our comments positive and constructive, even when we express any concern. And can I emphasize that point, please? Thank you. Who would like to speak first? I can go in alphabetical order. Yeah. At the end of the debate, Councillor Foote will sum up any points, and we will see if there is agreement, consensus, partial or whole. Thank you. Does anybody want to speak first, or shall I just go in alphabetical order? Okay, Councillor Mashisha.
Just
Carry on.
thank you, Chair. It's speaking on the report. Initially, my thoughts with scrutiny to consider this is that over the years, I've been a member of scrutiny for 3 years now, and the number of times that we've been presented with reports and with sort of bureaucracy rather than action. So I would like us as a group to this year, especially as we're coming through recovery, that we need to see more action rather than bureaucracy. Yes, the report here gives us the beginnings of what we are looking to achieve, but we need to be looking at how that is then implemented. I note that in the slides, one of the action points that we have been told is the £20 voucher scheme for shoppers. As much as I would welcome that, I see that as not really part of the recovery plan. This is a £2 million funds that was underspent and is now being used as part of the recovery. That's something that we need to put to one side. Is not to do with the recovery. The recovery is about the 4 points, which is the renewal of local economies, reimagining local places, tackling local inequalities, and empowering residents. I want you as scrutiny members to really think hard about the empowering of local residents. We know full well that hasn't been the case in the London Borough of Hounslow over the last 2 years, and that's something that we need to. Councillor Foote asks, how do I know that? Is because we've had a report from one of the groups that works for Hounslow to say that we need to give back more power to the communities. And that report was in our last overview and scrutiny panel meeting. I can't remember the name. Is it ECHO? The ECHO Centre? The one where the chief executive is also a trustee on it? Yeah. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's ECHO, ECLE. Okay. And it says that we need to be more more interactive with our community and more giving to the demands of what the local residents and local councillors do. So I think point number 4 is something that we as a scrutiny need to pursue further, especially as this report comes back in March next year, is what actions is this recovery plan taking in terms of engaging with our local community, in terms of empowering our smaller groups to come up and get their voices heard so that we can actually recover as a community. We don't want a top-down recovery. We want a bottom-up recovery. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mashisho. I think it's a shame that you find that the £20 voucher has not really helped, but it may help those people who are going to receive a £20 cut, the universal credit that your government is doing now. So
Okay, Chair. But again, that's a cheap political comment. But let me give you
it's
some.
actually accurate, though.
Okay. Well, let me give you some feedback on that, because I have had, I think so far 6 people emailed me saying that this £20 should be used somewhere else, because they don't need that money.
But many residents do. Maybe
yes,
not
So
all
my
of
point,
them, but a great many do.
So
And
my
a lot
point,
of them are now going to be losing £20
so my
for
point
universal
is,
credit.
if that was systematic, if that was planned out properly and targeted to the greatest need, to our most inequality areas, and every area has an area of inequality, including Chiswick, including Feltham. If you targeted that money, then yes, I agree, that works really well. Also, if you targeted businesses, if you targeted businesses that are struggling, and I know plenty of businesses, not just in Chiswick, but along the whole entire borough, who have not had any support whatsoever. That 2 million could have gone there. Again, targeting is the best way forward, not just giving free money to people sometimes who don't even need it.
Thank you, Councillor Mashisha. Councillor Lal.
Chair, I'm mindful of using officers' time and the time of our lead members wisely, and I honestly feel that this second opportunity for members to sum up is a bit futile, because I think what needs to be said has been said by all the members present, and I would, for one, move that we note the report and move on to the next item on the agenda.
Okay. Are there any seconders?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Do you have anything to sum up, Councillor Foot?
Yeah, very quickly, really. I have to disagree about the voucher. I think, the voucher has gone down extremely well, certainly in the western areas of the borough. Don't shake your head. You don't know anything about the western area of the borough. Do you? Well, you want to pay a bit more time there then. As far as those vouchers are concerned, I know that they've gone down very well in Feltham. The fact that you think otherwise may be different. I also note that when we look down the number of businesses that are connected to it, it's very heavily connected in Chiswick. Very, very well supported in Chiswick. So, that it is something that is there, and it's gone widely around, and I think that something that is not just to be sneered at. With all sorts of actions that can be helpful to members of the community, then we should be supporting. I really don't need to say any more than that, Chair. So, yeah, I think I'll wind up, and we go with the motion to.
So do you propose a motion?
I think Councillor Lyle.
I think we're all in agreement, Chair.
Thank you.
Are you ending the discussion then? Because this was meant to be a discussion rather than a summer up. I thought we were having a discussion before summing up.
Well, we thought there was quite a lot of questioning going on, and we want to get on.
I know you do, but
So-
it does mean that the discussion has been thwarted. I'd love to make a comment just on the point about
It's not the
Chiswick.
purpose of this committee, the way with this.
Chair,
We're supposed to be
you have-
scrutinising.
Councillor Bidoff is doing a normal 2-3 bites at the same cherry.
Yeah.
Can we just get on with the business?
Councillor Bidoff, if you have any specific questions or points, maybe you could email those. So then just so we can get on with the rest of the
Could
evening,
I just
please.
say that I think it's really unfair to be criticised like that when I have behaved in an absolutely standard way.
Okay, that's
I wanted
noted.
to talk about why it's been so supported in Chiswick by the traders, and that is because I promoted it heavily through the Chiswick Shops Task Force and all the contacts that I have.
So let him
Yeah.
know.
Thank
And it does reflect their keenness to get the cash. It's the traders who have registered. Ron was talking about the spenders. It's a very different thing. I know you did. Well, you
We're
did.
going round in
Yes,
circles,
you did.
Chair.
Yes, you did. I just wanted to clarify that I have given huge support to it on behalf of traders who really need the money.
Thank you, Councillor Bidoff. Right,
Tell
so
them you're gonna go at 9.
Cornwall, you've seconded it? Okay, so we're now going to, thank you, Councillor Curran.
Thanks very much, Chair and Committee.
Miss Philby and Miss Skinner, but Councillor Tuck just has something quick to say. Can you just hang on for a second? That's my fault.
Thank you, Chair.
It's too long.
Just a quick suggestion. We had MasterCard transactions, the number of transactions if we can also get the amount spent, comparison in amount spent, and not just the number of transactions, that will give us a clearer picture and whether we are actually recovering only the number of transactions increasing, or the amount actually being spent is increasing as well.
Thank you, Councillor Tuck. Good evening and thank you all. Okay, we come to the second part of the evening. Councillor Foote and I recently spoke with Councillor Bruce about the experiences of care leavers in the borough. This struck me as an important issue for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to consider. It is important that we all of us here, as a good corporate parent, are confident that the council provides the right help and support to those who are leaving its care. I welcome the opportunity to comment on work that is currently underway and to consider what more the council should be doing to support care leavers. Councillor Bruce's report asks specific contributions from the committee. I'll repeat those requests for the benefit of the OSC members. We are asked this evening to comment or identify areas that the committee considers it could support the council's work and ambitions with further focus and scrutiny activity in enhancing our organisation wide corporate parenting obligations. 2, consider where we can support care leavers' ambitions and transition into adulthood by wider engagement and partnership within the community, business and voluntary sector organisations. Finally, consider how care leavers can be actively engaged in any future work that the committee seeks to undertake within the scope of care leaver transition. In accordance with the process I mentioned previously, I would like to welcome Councillor Tom Bruce, Cabinet Member for Education, Children and Youth Services, to this meeting, and to thank him for talking to us on this important subject. Stephen Forbes will also be assistant, so thank you both. I've just got to say, we'd like to sort of see if we could get this done in 40 minutes, with that's in 5 minutes for everything. Thank you.
No problem. Do you want us to kick off?
Absolutely.
I wholeheartedly agree with your initial introduction there about the importance of the work we do for care leavers. We did have a very informal conversation about this, but towards the end of that conversation, we did think actually the chair and the vice chair of Scrutiny were sitting with the lead member, and this could be something and should be something that's formalised. And I welcome the opportunity, as always, to come to Scrutiny and talk about the work in my portfolio. It's very important work supporting those who have gone through the care system and are designated, called care leavers. I'm pleased, I was pleased a number of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it says in the report, that the age where we support care leavers, where local authorities are responsible for care leavers, has risen from 18 to 21 to 18 to 25. So there is much more scope for the work that we can do, much more longevity in the work that we can do. And when I started this portfolio, with this portfolio 8 or 9 years ago now, I met some a variety of young people, some care leavers, some in care, some have friends who they know, and there were lots of positive things, as there are now, said about Hounslow. But one of the things that they did say was the difficulty with transition, and that's really the big focus of what we're talking about in the short report. But I hope a detailed enough report that gives enough information about the main tenets of what we're talking about. So you've introduced those recommendations, and of course the department and I do welcome any comments that you make. I know Councillor Said and Councillor Mashisho are on the corporate parenting panel, so you will have even more insight into this than the other members of the committee here today. It talks about the basic principles of Hounslow, the 3 basic principles of the things that we look to do in order to support our care leavers as best we can, and how we're going about doing that, and how we feel that that they are best supported. I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to give a bit more detail on some of those things.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce, and thank you, Chair. I think fundamentally for me, the opportunity here, I think, is for you as elected members, as an OSC, to contribute, because I always default to the position that corporate parenting is a responsibility of every member, every officer within the council. It is a legal obligation placed upon us to act as a corporate parent to achieve the best outcomes for our youngsters. The thing I choose frequently not to do, although I mention it, is to refer to national evidence as to the outcomes of care leavers in our society. It is not a great story and has not been for most of my adult life, and certainly most of my professional life. So you can look to things like the criminal justice system, prison population, those who haven't achieved tertiary education, i.e. university, and you will see care leavers disproportionately impacted across all factors. But I think for us, the opportunity is what can we achieve better? So whilst there are certain things in law, and we chose when we gave the report not to fill out all the detail of all the technical things that me as the Director of Children's Services, officially, our staff do, because there's a lot of technical stuff that we do. It's fundamentally about where do we want to go as an authority with the significant resources we have across the organisation. So I think in terms of the recommendation, Chair, about your thoughts, because you are users of council services, you have oversight of council services, you understand the local communities, where can we enact across businesses, charitable organisations, community organisations to make care leavers an absolute priority? And there is huge amounts of work to be done. The government launched with a number of partner organisations about 2 years ago, the Care Leaver Covenant. That was a bit slow to take off. It's a national programme of trying to get organisations to sign up to putting care leavers at the heart of everybody's thoughts. And I would welcome and encourage support for us as an organisation to pursue that alone, let alone all the other opportunities about housing, a sense of place, a sense of community. Because what we forget, as Councillor Bruce said, sometimes as professionals, and I will put my hand up to this, is while our obligation exists to 25, just because you're 25 and you're no longer designated as a care leaver, does the experience of being in care leave you at that point? And I certainly have experienced over the years grown adults in their 30s and 40s returning to their point of origin, as they
30
described
seconds.
it, in terms of the council to seek further support. So I would welcome any conversation with yourselves about what we can strive to be ambitious. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will now have questions, if anybody has any questions. And I would like us just to, think the last time we took a lot of time up with the questions, and then there was not enough time for debate. So let's just keep to the point, please. I'm going to go around in alphabetical order. If you don't have a question, that's absolutely fine. Don't feel under pressure. Councillor Akinzada.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a question, but it's just when I was going through the report, the most important thing which I've noticed, the emotional support we are offering, or we will be offering, in combination of education and training, because especially some of these children, they may have come from a background where they are not easy for them to engage with people in conversation and explaining to them their problems. So even once they are not in that care, they may need that support. So it's really encouraging, and I will even see if we can get more details or data how many people we have engaged and help, or they have come back to us for any help. That will kind of give us an idea that how this plan is working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Akinzada. Councillor Bidoff, do you have a question?
Yes, and just some general points. Thank you very much. I found this very poignant. I know it's very short, but it was even so, it was poignant. At the beginning, in the Hounslow context, and actually throughout, you've got some facts and stats in bullet points and others hidden in prose. It would be really helpful to have them all listed and where we don't have them, to have them given. So you talk about a large cohort of care leavers. What's large, if you see what I mean? Those sorts of ones. I don't necessarily need an answer now, but I found it very simple to see, oh, there are 103 16 to 7-year-olds. And then there are prose paragraphs where it's a bit harder to keep track.
I'd accept that. Without going into detail now, if you want to ask specifically at a later date the things that you actually specifically want, we can definitely get that and share that with the committee. I'm more than happy to do that.
They're probably all there. It's just some of it's
That's
hidden
fine.
in
No,
prose.
yeah, that's fine.
So it would be nice to have an update where it's slightly differently presented. I'd love to see the covenant. That would have been a useful addition as well. That would, if we could have that as just as generally for us as scrutiny members.
And again, we can share that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The really poignant point for me was care leaver isolation. And I left the end of the document feeling that they were even more isolated than that sentence at the beginning. That's nobody's fault. I just think that there are things that we could look at here to get care leavers involved. It's the point that Ron made earlier about empowering local people and getting them involved in their local communities. We've all got voluntary organizations or events or activities that go on, and we could all make, I think, an awful lot more effort to help our most vulnerable young people get involved, perhaps before they leave. I'm just thinking about, and obviously it's got to be cool, and a lot of things that go on aren't necessarily cool, but that's not to say that people in care don't also care about others. But working with Feltham in Bloom, just thinking about that, or local elderly organisations, there's Age Concern in Chiswick, for example, the Hogarth Youth Centre, even events like the Brentford Market, where they might like some volunteers. I'm not into exploiting anybody, but there are things that are going on in our community which we could help them get involved with, that might give them a sense of purpose and a sense there's something beyond care.
Just to respond to that, Chair, I fully agree. I think that's a very good point. I made the point in a members' briefing about children in care in a more broad aspect than we're talking about here, but I'll repeat that publicly, but you've gone a little bit further than that, is that if anybody, particularly councillors as the corporate parent, if anybody has links with organisations that you've mentioned there, businesses in terms of jobs and looking at that, absolutely talk to me, talk to Stephen, talk to the department, and we can link that in somewhere. But I think you've gone further and quite rightly talked about the wider aspect of just being involved in your community, just going out there and doing things. And I think that's great. And again, suggesting those things, getting those things in. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get the young people signing up, but the more that's there, the more likely that is to happen, and the more encouragement we can and the team can get them going. So I think that's an excellent idea.
Perhaps we could all contribute to a list, and there's no reason, presumably travel costs money for, do they travel free? Young people? I can't remember. But there's no reason why somebody in one part of the borough shouldn't go to another part of the borough if there's something happening, something like Green Days, where it's a massive old traditional fair with Bat the Rat and whatever else. It's a family event, and we don't want to make them feel they haven't got families, but there might be opportunities there. And there's some scope for them to do some shadowing. You mentioned businesses. There can be things in businesses that they could shadow or get to know about, which opens their eyes to things about the world of work they might not have come across elsewhere.
I think that you're absolutely right. Sorry to interrupt. I think you're absolutely right. What is difficult for the department is, there are hundreds of businesses and hundreds of things if across the borough. If people know organisations that would definitely be willing to take, it makes the job much easier rather than a fishing exercise. You see what I mean? So I think,
absolutely.
but you're absolutely right.
Yes, not everybody's involved keen on sport or music. Those opportunities are sort of borough-wide and available. The Youth Parliament, of course, only brings in some people as well, but all of these things could be listed to see if they spark something in individuals, perhaps. So I think that's my main point, and also connecting them with organisations that might help them. There's a lot going on in churches. If you haven't got a faith, you might not want to go there, but actually there are some choirs in churches with people from around the place who aren't believers necessarily. Organisations like Samaritans, there are roles in organisations like that don't involve you actually doing the befriending, if that's something that you can't cope with, but there is there are other opportunities. So I think we can all pull together quite a lot of suggestions there. And I think that's probably all I've got to say. Your report is the only one that doesn't list an officer, and I know that's a really small point, but with the contact details at the top, we've got officers on the others, and we didn't have yours. It'd be nice to have that. Thanks.
Thank you,
He's not
Councillor Biddulph.
he's not getting away with it. Stephen Forbes. Stephen Forbes.
Thank you. Some really helpful and productive, helpful suggestions there, Councillor Biddulph. Councillor Chowdhury, any questions or comments or suggestions?
Thank you, Chair. Just had a bit of a thought and just well, a bit of a question about what sort of feedback mechanisms are in place for care leavers to feed back on any support or care or anything that is in place so they can give timely feedback and that can be captured, and any changes or anything that might be needed to be made are kind of done in a timely way. So yeah, just was wondering what sort of feedback mechanisms are in place for that, please. Thank you.
So just very briefly, Chair, so we are obliged under regulations to have a children in care council, which was for all our children who were looked after. And on top of that, we have a care leavers group. That's a small group of our care leavers. It's the ones that are organised. They are never short in bringing to my attention, I think to Councillor Bruce when he turns up, the things that they think are important. Sometimes that's for them individually, and we have to then work with them to try and expand that out. So under the corporate parenting panel, as a number of members around the table here will know, we've got into a number of themed groups because the young people in care and the care leavers felt that things like accommodation and the issue of self-identity were quite important for them, that they wanted us to hear about it. So there've been a couple of working groups involving members, elected members, senior officers and care leavers as well, and they've fed back. We now need to take those actions. I think I'm very keen to then extend further, again, as the family business, and I often use that term, how we make opportunity across the whole corporate body for our care leavers to give a view, because they have a very specific, huge, wide range of experience. And maybe just reflecting, Councillor Biddulph, we've got about at the moment, I think, 305 care leavers, who are 305 individuals with a wealth of experiences that probably will suck up all those opportunities and all the feedback that they would like to give us. It's how we can then make that work for us. And that is ultimately the challenge. And it needs probably, and I think it's my appeal to yourselves, more than just me and the department to enable to support that and hear that feedback and collate it. So I think there is opportunities for yourselves and others to get involved in that feedback loop.
And also just to add, the corporate parenting panel itself, which Councillor Chowdhury, I forgot, you're one of the newest members of it. So sorry about that. He's co-chaired by one of the young people. So we discussed beforehand the agenda and how things are going to run and introducing things along those lines. And there's also the annual survey that is written in part by the young people, the Children in Care Council, that goes out to all young people, whether they're based in Hounslow or further afield, to collate that feedback as well, to ensure that we understand what's going on. And it's really important that we get as much back as possible. And that can fluctuate the amount, you know, I mean, it's like voting, you know, you'd like everybody to vote in elections. They don't. You'd like everybody to respond to the survey. It'd be unrealistic to say that, you know, they don't. But we try, you know, to push as much as possible. And I know the participation team do that really, really well.
Sorry, just a quick whisper there. Thank you.
Chair, I think the corporate parenting principles as outlined in this report give us a good overview. And I also look forward to the short summaries that are sent out to members in members' matters every now and again. So it keeps abreast of what is going on in your sphere of activity. But specifically on this report, would you like to share with us, if you can, the relevance about, on page 13, about unaccompanied asylum-seeking children? So we have the situation as is, but going forward, clearly that's going to change somewhat, and are we prepared?
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. The world of unaccompanied asylum seekers has been a very dynamic one since it came into play, and the current events that are happening just now are just one of a number of changes that have happened over the last 10 years. We're agreed across England about local authorities having a quota, and it's based on an unusual little demographic thing. It results for us in about having 50 of our looked after children, some then being care leavers, as unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We generally stay underneath that, so we usually sit around about 47. But what that indicator doesn't show is actually the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that come to us and are processed through age assessment support and then into care leavers and leave us. So we actually have quite a significant churn. That churn is becoming faster, as many factors across the world bring more unaccompanied asylum-seeking children to us. For us, it is a significant challenge. We've got a specific provider that supports a lot of the accommodation for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, but I think for them alone, their step into adulthood is even more challenged than some of those that come from the indigenous population that come into our care. So again, I don't tend to say we struggle. We do a valiant job of trying to support those youngsters. But again, any other opportunities out there in the community that could support those youngsters, particularly have a sense of place. That's frequently, and picking up again, Councillor Biddulph, sense of place relates to isolation and connection. And we know for definite the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children struggle frequently at the point that we leave them to find that sense of place. And that's something I think we do need to step up to.
Councillor Mashisha.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the work of Councillor Bruce that you do here. So I'm really grateful. There's a few things, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you've said that you wanted a conversation. And this is an overview and scrutiny, and I think this is one area where we, hopefully, with the way you've approached this, we can scrutinize, and we can challenge, and we can come up with solutions as well. The first thing I would say is I'm aware of the Care Leavers Covenant, and I've kind of been in touch with them a few times on different issues. But do we as Hounslow, and this is question number one, just so you know, is do we as Hounslow perhaps, can we set up some form of an alumni of care leavers where we have a monthly email or letter that goes out to that 300 plus, and even, you know, this will be increasing year on year, of course. And there's some care leavers who are only in care with us for 2 weeks or 2 months or even a year. So it's not necessarily from young age to old, but is there a way of staying in touch in that sense? That's question number one. Question number two is a little bit on what Councillor Biddulph mentioned, and that's when she was talking about it, I also thought about the stigma of a care leaver. There is a stigma with care leavers, and it takes care leavers a while, speaking from experience, to actually come out and say, well, I was looked after, or because some people just don't want to share that kind of information. So how are we as a council going to work with that stigma to ensure that those isolated individuals, as Councillor Biddulph pointed out, are not as isolated, because this becomes a mental health thing, or a traumatic experience for many of them, and to kind of associate themselves with care leavers and then being reminded that over and over again, sometimes that can work in reverse. So how can we tackle that? Do we have mentoring? Do we have one-to-one support for psychologists and counselors counseling those care leavers? That's question number two. And then number three is to do with the offer of work experience and jobs. And we talked about this is a family business, and I really admire that concept. What that means is that we as councillors, these are our children. We are the corporate parents. This is family, and if you're a family, if you have kids, if I ever have kids, the first thing I would do is when they're at a working age, I would get them in to accompany me, shadow me at work, and see what it's like to do a 9 to 5. So can we as councillors work with our social workers and get some of our 16 to 18 members in the council with council officers just for a day, just for something? If we cannot go out to market to the private sectors and so on, we can do it in-house. And I note, Councillor Bruce, when I first joined, you had a target of 400 jobs for looked after children in the borough. I know COVID has hit, so it's probably, we're not quite there yet, but how far have we come with that pledge that we put at the beginning of 2018? Because that is another way of getting our looked after children into getting some of work experience placement. I'm not going to push you on that because I know we've had COVID and we have so many other things have gone along, but I know we were making progress on that at the beginning. And finally, Chair, if you allow me, the last thing is, I think you talked about at the beginning, Councillor Bruce, is using our local businesses who are looking to come to Hounslow, especially with the connections that we have with Heathrow and so on. They all have this thing called corporate social responsibility attached to them. Could we find a way as a group, as a council, where we can work with new businesses that come to our area to say, right, as part of our welcome to you, to our area, well, you need to give us some work experience placements, 2 a year, as a new business coming into the area. That work experience placement will make a massive difference to our children. The one nugget which we need to discuss is safeguarding, because whenever I've come across businesses that want to do
30 seconds, Councillor Mashisha.
Whenever I come across businesses that want to do work experience placement, safeguarding has always been an issue. That can we find a way, a streamlined way, where we can address safeguarding and yet being able to be in touch with our looked after children? So those are my 4 points, and I hope that we can come to some answers there.
Councillor Bruce.
I'll do my best, Ron. Okay, I'll start with the pledge. You're right to mention the pledge. The pledge wasn't specifically about care leavers. It was about apprenticeship and training opportunities. The 400 were in-house, so that's general, not specifically on care leavers, but it was general 400 in-house, and another 3,600 externally. It's a good opportunity to say we have already met those targets. That has been met now. In terms of apprenticeships and training opportunities, both in the council and outside. We bought that to a scrutiny. I can't remember, it was the committee itself or one of the panels right back at the beginning of this administration, 2018, at some point then. If there's time in the schedule, I would welcome to have a look back at that, and also look about, and we've already begun looking at how we're going to move forward with that and the things that we're going to do beyond that, because apprenticeships and training opportunities are one thing, but you're absolutely right to identify looked after children and care leavers being very, very specific. And I think that would be the next thing I would want to make a big focus on. Now, we do have a big focus on doing that. We do have opportunities within the council for care leavers now. There have been care leavers working in the council now doing that, but we would want to extend that. I talked to my cabinet colleagues about their departments, their portfolios, and I know Stephen does to his director colleagues and executive director colleagues about what they can do. So yes, you're absolutely right that we should extend that. There was some others. Alumni you mentioned. Did you mean beyond 25? Is that what you were talking about? Right. Okay. I mean, I actually, it's a very good point. I don't know what we do. I know we absolutely are in touch, obviously, with the 18 to 25. But what happens once they leave? I don't know if Stephen has an answer to that. But it's a good point. It's a very good point.
We have absolutely no legal duty to care leavers after the age of 25. I think for me as a social care professional, that morally just never sits right in the centre of my heart and being. And I think as any local authority, and we were all under financial pressures over the last 10, 15 years, this is part of our challenge. I posed a question in my last authority, is if a 29-year-old came to us and said, I had a terrible time as a care leaver and I didn't pick up education, but I've processed everything now and I'm ready, what would we do? Would we fund and support them for the 3 years of university? We have no legal duty to do so. But given what that individual may have gone through in their early years with us, would that be the moral and right thing to do as the family? I think that's the sort of challenge that we collectively need to get our heads around, because there is some potential resource to that, but at 25, there is a cut-off. And I think the term care leaver is an absolute misnomer. We leave them. The system, the state leaves them. They do not leave us. So I think that's one of the moral and operational challenges. How do we bridge that gap into, I left home when I was 16, but I kept creeping back until I was probably well into my late 20s. But we don't offer the same.
You also had a question about business and work experience. And I mean, part of the pledge was the fact that businesses have stepped up across the borough, and we've got a number offering apprenticeships and training opportunities and going off and doing things out in the community. But has that been specifically for care leavers? No. And I think that would be one of the next things that we should be looking at. So alongside how we would move that pledge forward in the next 6 months to the election, 9 months to the election, but also beyond that, whoever wins. I think that is something that the next administration definitely should be looking at. So what their pledge would be, I mean, whether it's a formal pledge or whatever, what they would be saying they want to support and how they want to support care leavers. There was something else I haven't answered. I can't remember. Oh, sorry, go on, Steve. Sorry.
Just to go back to Councillor Bruce's first point, Councillor Michel, in the Kickstart programme, I think we had corporately identified 46 Kickstart opportunities across the corporate body for people who could access that. Of that, with valiant efforts across colleagues across all the other departments and my own team, 10 of those were our own care leavers. So that was a success. Unfortunately, that 10 has dwindled to 5 because of the very specific challenges for care leavers about engaging in social situations, the concept of work, timing. And with valiant efforts, we tried to sustain some of those individuals, but they've dropped out. That doesn't mean we won't then think about the next opportunity, but that exemplifies sometimes the challenge of the stability and the demands of work with the offer and the support programme that needs to come with it. And I think, again, going back to if businesses are coming up with offers, what we need to hear is what's the support offer from the business, because my team can't always be the support offer. So if you are offering someone who has had a difficult background, expect some challenge. But it's how you as an organisation, as a voluntary organisation or a business, or us as a corporate parent, will support that challenge. And it can be challenging. I've got one that I relate to regularly who doesn't turn up to meetings sometimes, but when is there is fantastic. It's creative, vibrant, but we're still struggling with the concept that work is a Monday to Friday thing, 9 to 5. But then if I look back to the history of that youngster, I understand why.
Yeah, I mean, as any parent would know, that you're going to face those challenges with your own children, and you don't give up. You don't say, well, that's it, that's done. You continue, and that's exactly what we would be doing. When Stephen shared that piece of information with me, my question was, and he had the, what are we going to do? We're going to take a step back. We're going to allow that to settle, and we're going to go again when it's appropriate, and ensure those people are supported.
Quickly, please, Mr.
Just a quick one. Thank you so much for that. I need to understand this, Steve. If a care leaver is 18 and he or she is about to be given a place to stay, but he or she decides to go to university, is their housing in Hounslow or surrounding area kept for them when they return from the university? Because let's say they go to Manchester to do a degree there. Do they lose their right?
So there are, again, without going into huge technicality, there are some legal loopholes about holding accommodation for people who are in halls of residence at distance. So if they're local, it's not so difficult. If they are going to Manchester, it becomes much more difficult. Again, I think that's where we have a degree of discretion as authority, and that's where I would expect my staff to be coming to heads of service and myself, if needs be, and for me to have a conversation with Councillor Bruce about what level of discretion do we want to play here. I'm not about to scupper the chances of a youngster who might be able, because we have few, we do pretty well in Hounslow in terms of access to university, but we still have less than we'd like. I'm not standing in the way of anybody going to university. We will find a way through the virtual college, and Kate, the virtual college head, is even more passionate about this than I am, and that's sometimes very frightening, but incredibly worthy. We'll find a way through the resources we've got to try and make that work. We are a big organisation with resources to hand. It feels wrong for us not to find a way to make that work. But the law does not necessarily recognise that being a particular challenge for care leavers, the law that we operate under.
Can I just echo what Stephen was saying, particularly about the virtual college? The role of the virtual college is supporting young people in care up to 18, but there, as it says here, there is work to strengthen that with care leavers and particularly, not particularly, but also with young people going into university. We've had a couple of instances where there have been some challenges in front, not from Hounslow, I'm happy to say, but just a couple of things about, you know, where they are. And I've been happy to be, more than happy to be involved to ensure that that person gets that place that they deserve. You know, they worked hard at school through a number of challenges in their personal life. They have deserved that place at university, I would say, more than anyone else. And we have been able to get them there. And we've had the young people here, I'm not saying we, young people here have had some great success, and that's really good. Is that everything that we've answered? I can't, yeah, cool, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tuckle, question or a comment?
Thank you, Chair. One suggestion, we talked about mental health of care leavers. Would it not be a good idea to get somebody who has left the care and is a bit more successful in his career or social status to invite and hold some sort of motivational speaking to the people who are leaving care right now, to tell them and help them in their mental status, that it's not all doom and gloom and you can be successful?
So I don't know if we do that, Stephen can answer this, if we do that in a formal sense, but there are care leavers who come to corporate parenting panel and the Children in Care Council, and there's cross work between young people, older young people, so we're talking mid-teens, and care leavers. There is a person who sits on corporate parenting as a care leaver now, and is incredibly vocal about the things that she has experienced, what we did well in Hounslow, but what we did wrong, and how we should improve next time. But also to you know, motivational to the young people, you know, who are in some cases 10 years younger than her, because she is demonstrating someone who is, you know, has been incredibly successful, you know, gone into is a mother, raising a fantastic family, and, you know, sets an example for what is possible for everybody, regardless of, you know, the difficult circumstances. I don't know about any formal arrangements though.
So one of the ideas that's popped up over the last kind of 5 years nationally, and I did it in my previous authority, is the role of a care leaver ambassador. It has a double edge to it that you need to work it out properly. And in my previous authority, we actually split it between 3 individuals, very much like the individual, Councillor Bruce, that we've got here, who is she's beyond the 25 now. She keeps coming, much beyond the 25, but she keeps coming back. She's very vocal. She's very articulate. I have a slight challenge about just giving it to one individual, because then you get one dimension, whereas we potentially move it across to 3 or 4 on a rolling basis. They then can build some capacity together. So if the pandemic hadn't challenged me for a lot of my thinking time, I would have progressed that idea with Councillor Bruce and Cabinet a lot faster, because I think, you know, a care leaver ambassador should be sitting in meetings like this in the public setting, coming and talking to you, coming to other planning meetings, to partnership meetings we have across the counter, also being that ambassador for what care leavers are about and supporting other care leavers to be vocal. I'm also keen, because there are some national leads, and I've not yet found someone from Hounslow who's a notable individual who originated in Hounslow who might have gone in through the care process. But you will all have recognised the programme that Lem Sase did a number of years ago about, in terms of getting young people to articulate. Our participation team do fantastic work in some of the creative side with our care leavers about expressing themselves. So we had a young individual who came all the way from Afghanistan some years ago. He's done a published book. We've got some creative people. We need to do more of that, and we need to celebrate that. I think a bit about self-worth and isolation. Our job is to celebrate, to hold up and to celebrate, and to pick up what Councillor Mashicho said. I think you and I have had this conversation. The way to beat stigma is to be proud, and we need to be proud for them. So we need to find ways of making more of that happen, large and small, I think.
Very quickly, Councillor Biddulph.
Just picking up on that. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I had one more question.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay. when we said about Hounslow context, we missed an age group 10 to 15 in the breakdown that you have provided, which is a quite significant number. And I believe that's the age where the future is in a make or break state. So if we can include that breakdown as well, and some programs where we start educating those people as well, that soon there will be time when they will be at a stage when they will be leaving the care, so they concentrate a lot more on studies and the career.
You're quite right. I'm sure in the version that I signed off, it did have that in there because it's in a minute. So I'll follow that up. I don't know why it's not. It's not a big number, and the key issue, regrettably, picking up what you said, the councillor, about education, is that more and more in that age group of 10 to 15, we have all the new pressures of criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation, and teenagers being part of that exploitation by adults. Their lives inherently are generally much more disrupted than the older cohort who've had a chance to break out of some of that, and the younger cohort. So there is a significant issue for us growing, and we are slightly behind the demographic curve in comparison to inner London, that this group is going to be particularly challenging for us about what we would term professionally as adolescent safeguarding. And I've just had a meeting this afternoon looking at our most vulnerable top 10 children, which I do every month. Every single one of those is 14 or 15, and it's all to do with criminal exploitation. And I dare to say, regrettably, that the law of the land that sets out child protection has no answers in our toolbox to deal with that are significant and powerful. And we have no answer nationally as to how we protect those children in the fullest of all potential onslaughts from exploitation. Exploitation is a terrible, terrible thing. But we try our best. And for that cohort, you're absolutely right, trying to get them stabilized so we can get them to the point of being 18 and stepping into adulthood is the biggest challenge of all. And again, we need partnership help and system help to try and make that work, I think.
Can I just say, sorry, yeah, it's a very good point, and I can't believe someone hasn't spotted it already. But as I promised Councillor Biddulph earlier, we'll provide the numbers and we'll make sure that that's in there as well.
Councillor Biddulph, but just I want to be mindful of the fact that Stephen specially requested if he could leave by 9, as he has a holiday to get himself ready for. So, please.
So, Chair, I don't know if you're going to have a discussion next or if we're still continuing with...
Well, I mean, we've had lots of points made.
Yes.
It was actually a question I was going to ask all of the committee. You know, we've had questions, but we've also had lots of suggestions and ideas. So I just thought if there were no more questions or debate per se, then we could perhaps go on to the motion, but I'm happy to. I know Councillor Foot. I was going to come to Councillor Foot. Don't worry.
I would just love to make 2 points. So I just was clearing with you whether it's got a questions now or discussion or summary.
Is that okay with everybody? Yeah, good.
Okay. I'd written down before you used the word celebrate. What about having an open day for them? I don't know if that's possible with us here. I'm leaving this thinking I really want to meet them all, and I don't know if they would like to meet us, but I think there are some opportunities there potentially. And the next point might well be completely wrong. I take your point, Stephen, about having an ambassador and how awkward that is and dependence and those sorts of points, but there are 60 of us. Can we do more as individuals? Would allocating a counsellor to 4 or 5 people to be available on the phone be achievable? You know, this is why I wanted it for discussion, really. It may be completely undoable, but I think we are corporate parents, and I don't feel engaged with any of our looked after children, and I'd love to be. In a positive way, obviously. So linking that with celebrate, linking it with an open day, linking it with them coming to tell us more. We had a fantastic meeting. We've had 2, I think. When Tony Lukey was mayor, we had nearly a whole borough council was devoted to young people coming to talk to us. But we also had the youth parliament here. Something like that would be wonderful for us. I don't know if it'd be wonderful for them, but I think that engagement and showing that we really do think about them and worry about them would be good. And then the other point was just to say that I do think that there are links. Sorry, Tom. There are links with obesity and your document here that poverty, obesity, those sorts of things are all hugely linked. And I'd love to see more linking of those two issues, perhaps in another discussion, if you're leaving today. Thank you.
No, no. We have an awards ceremony. Well, before the pandemic, we used to have an awards ceremony, and I'm sure we'll bring that back. And I can't remember the exact who we invited. I know Ron's been. I know other people. John Todd has been. The mayor has attended as well. It's a fantastic event. But you are right. There is no limit, really, is there? We can still do more. You're absolutely right. Tony Lukey did have, when he was mayor, a couple of people. In fact, one of those was the person I was talking about earlier. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. You know, we've said about celebrating. We do that. I think we can do that more. We could do that in a more targeted and directed way, potentially. The logistics of that, I will look at Stephen, and perhaps he can answer the operational aspect of that. But I think in principle, you're absolutely right.
So the only challenge I would give you, and I will probably channel the care leavers here, having been on the side of it, is they don't come to you, you come to them. Yes, and I think that is the challenge for how we make that happen. So I think, I think it's great for me to go back to them to say, I came on your behalf to this meeting as your representative, in some ways, as your corporate parent to members. They were very keen to get to know you and to support you. How do we make that happen, young people? What are you comfortable with? What do you want? Because I know that probably the one young person we're talking about would relish being here, no doubt. But many of the others who've also got a different experience and valid points, good and bad, would find this, they wouldn't. Yeah. So I think what we need to do is to get them the message of your enthusiasm, and then we have a conversation with them about how do they want to engage with you and where do we make that happen? Because I am really keen to engage your enthusiasm. And I think they would be as well. I think in looking at Councillor Bruce, I think in the new structure we've got, and Councillor Mashisho, in terms of the corporate parenting subgroups, that has engendered a degree of trust. And trust is something that doesn't often come easy to those who have experienced care. And I think they have trusted that we are interested in working with them, taking their lead and hearing what they've got to do. So we need to do more of that with them rather than bringing them into a formal setting. So I think we'll find out, I will rack my brains with them to find a way where we can extend that enthusiasm and find their response to how we engage all of you in that, because I think it's valuable.
I didn't necessarily mean formal. I accept that if we bring them here, there is a degree of formality. I'll go anywhere in the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Foote.
Thanks, Chair. I have to, I'll go back with a memory that I have that goes back to the early 70s when I was a young councillor on the then quite young London Borough of Hounslow. And we had a care home for children in Hamworth. And I remember going there, as I say, in my early 20s, and a young lad attaching himself to my coattails and following me all the way around. And that had a very strong effect upon me then that stayed with me all of my life. And it's that has driven me. Fortunately, the concept of care homes for children has moved on, and we've developed and gone elsewhere because it's not it wasn't a particularly good area to have. But I think that one of the things that we need to see is we really need to let our care leavers be the ones that drive this. When we talk about connections with us, I feel it should be them that are driving it. It's not up to us. I think we also look at this in the way we would look as a family. I mean, I've brought up two sons and taken them through that era, and we know that they as teenagers they can be difficult and they've got their problems, and we try and deal with them, and not always very adequately. And then as two young men, they've decided that they want to move on and leave home. One of my youngest son left in very much just on at the age of 19, left and went to live in Southeast Asia, which we sort of saw him just wasting away from not being able to get proper meals, etc. So all of those things are we take as parents, and I see the same thing happening here, that we should be looking in the same way we would with our own children about how we look at children in care, and all the lessons that we learn with our own children are the same lessons that we can apply to children in care. And I think that that's something that is very, very important. I mean, sorry, I put some notes down. I mean, really, I really come back to the fact, I think, that saying, yes, it should be the children themselves that drive it, and let us then pick up with what they're saying. We did have this several years ago, where we had, prior to the pandemic, where we had a number of meetings where we saw some fantastic children, who've done so extremely well. I mean, I'll give you another story, really perhaps at the other end of the spectrum. Recently, I had a complaint from residents, a couple of ladies in Hamworth living on an estate, who were complaining about a young person that had moved in and was making a lot of noise and upsets and so on. What they were unaware of, that this was a care leaver. And it was a very difficult thing to try and deal with, because the care leavers are entitled to their own privacy, and you've got to be very careful. But I did make it known that it wasn't just as simple as they thought, and their attitudes changed dramatically, instantly, when they realised that this wasn't some teenager coming in there just there to upset their lives. It was somebody that had been through a lot of difficulties and so on, and their attitude, as I say, as neighbours changed, and they then from there on in spent time with that young lady in her flat that she was living in, and they spent time meeting them on the day and going out. So the whole thing changed when people realised what things are, and it's. I was quite gratified by that situation as well. So that's there. Yeah.
As I said, I know we usually have questions and then debate, but I wonder if everybody feels that we've covered it for this evening, and we're happy if there's, are you Councillor Mashisha? Okay, just because Stephen wants to leave, that's fine.
Second, but just following up from Councillor Foot's comments, I mean, yes, we're here celebrating the good bits about our care leavers and the ones who are articulate and successful and so on. But let's not forget that care leavers are also just one step away from entering the criminal justice system. We are that close. I know many people I grew up with in foster homes who just one mistake and their lives was changed upside down. So it's good that we bring the ones who are successful and articulate to this kind of meetings, but we also have to be mindful that most of the care leavers are not articulate. They're not of that way inclined.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I wouldn't necessarily say you have more experience clearly of this than I do, but I would say there are lots of people in lots of different circumstances, whether they're care leavers or not, can get themselves into difficulties where they're one step away. So I don't think it's specific to that, but I do accept your point about not just saying we're doing a great job and aren't these people, this group over here so wonderful. I hope that certainly early on in this discussion, and the things I've written down are about those people that you were just saying, that how we are supporting those better. And I hope that you feel as a committee that you've been able to express the things that we can do as a department and the things that you can help us with, because I think there is, and we've all acknowledged here, the role that as corporate parents we play. And I think that's really important, because that's what we're looking at. We're obviously, whatever we're doing is having some success, lots of success with lots of young people, but we need to do more. And that's absolutely what I've heard this evening and what we can do together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I, Chair, just come back in on that? Because I think that it's not just care. I mean, I grew up in Hamworth. I was born and bred in Hamworth. was a pretty tough place, certainly in the early years of my life. I had many friends that ended up in brushes with the law, and some of them, you know, even worse than that. I was very fortunate. My mother was a very strong lady and kept me away from that sort of thing. But, you know, I saw it with friends. It's not something that's peculiar to care leavers. It's the community. It's the way it is. And if you're in those sort of areas, you will see those sort of situations. And you know, I'm still in touch with many of those people that I grew up with today. So I know that how some of them have managed to pull themselves out of that kind of situation, and others that have just gone down into it, and some of them have spent time in prison because of the way things have gone. So, you know, it is a cross section of the community, and our care leavers, I think, are equally a cross section of the community.
Thank you, Councillor Foot. Would you like to propose a motion?
Right, I think I mean, the comments that were made here in the paper here that says that that we look at the recommendations to in terms of our debate, to comment on and identify areas that the committee considers it would support the council's work and ambitions, with further focus and scrutiny activity in enhancing our organisation-wide corporate pairing obligations, to consider where we can support care leavers' ambitions and transition into adulthood by wider engagement and partnership within the community business and voluntary sector organisations, and to consider how care leavers can be actively engaged in any future work that the committee seeks to undertake within the scope of care leaver transition. I think those are the points that cover much of the debate that's gone on here this evening, and I would like to move that we support those items, Chair.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Can I ask, can we all vote? Are we all in support of that this evening?
Agreed.
Agreed? Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Bruce. Thank you very much, Stephen. Have a fabulous holiday.
Yes, enjoy your holiday, Steve. So we've overrun. You've overrun you for 3 minutes.
Lastly, but certainly not least, we are going to look at the last item on the agenda, well, almost the last item, obesity in Hounslow. We will now receive a presentation from Councillor Atherton and Martin Waddington, Director of Commissioning Considering Obesity in the Borough. I'm keen that the OSC involves itself in pre-decision scrutiny, and this topic is an example of where scrutiny can add its voice to the policy direction the authority takes. This report today emphasises that obesity cannot be resolved by the actions of a single department of the council, or indeed a single organisation. It is important, however, that we consider what the London Borough of Hounslow can contribute to tackling the issues in the borough. This evening, the committee are asked to consider some specific issues, and I'd urge members actually to bear these in mind as we contribute our thoughts on the issue, or questions even. How do we make more people walk in our green spaces? How do we ensure our leisure services support the needs of all of our population? How do we design space so people walk rather than drive? And how do we improve the diets of our population? Would you like to introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction for this agenda item. I think we can be sometimes nervous when we're talking about obesity, but we absolutely cannot be, and we won't be in the London Borough of Hounslow, because it's a significant health risk, and we're very aware here at Hounslow how much it is detrimental to the health of a large proportion of our residents, children and adults. So I'm really pleased that we're bringing this report this evening. When I first met Kelly, our Director of Public Health, we had a discussion around obesity, and it was really great to hear her ambition around this topic. and it was not long before the pandemic. So there's been sort of some delays. I also have had a number of conversations with Martin, where we've talked about, what are our ambitions for Hounslow when it comes to health. And I know we talk a lot about wanting to be a healthier borough, wanting to be a borough where we can be proud of the action that we take, so that everyone has the opportunity to bring their children up well, to look after themselves well, to have good health and well-being. This report is really great, and Martin's going to take us through an overview of the presentation that you've already been given, and setting out our actions as far as what we're going to do to have like a population management approach, which I think is really important. We are aware that it's a national issue and it's a London issue, that we do have a problem around obesity. We are better than some of our near neighbours, but we're also worse than some of our near neighbours. So we recognise that there's things that we can do to improve this issue and to see all our residents healthier and more active.
Thank you, Martin.
Good evening, members. I'm Martin Waddington. I'm the Director of Joint Commissioning for the Council, but I'm also the Director of Hounslow CCG and working with the North West London health system. And firstly, I think this is a really exciting topic. I don't think we should really talk about obesity. I think we should talk about healthy people living healthy lives and having high quality lives. I think it's something that Hounslow should really aspire to do. And if COVID's done anything, it's shown us the importance of having a healthy lifestyle and living well and looking after yourself, because when pandemics come along, they do hit us in a way that we never would think. So I hope this energizes you. I do want you to leave thinking it's a big issue we need to tackle. But it's not easy, is it? It's not you eat less, you exercise more, you're slim. Our worlds are much more complex than that. And therefore, we have to look at obesity as a very complex issue that we need to solve through a long-term strategy, working together as a system. The headlines nationally are very grim, not just locally. Sorry, I forgot to say, I'm not going to go through the 47 slides we've given you. We gave you those because we thought it was a very interesting topic. I hope it stimulated your brains and made you come to help contribute to the discussion, but I'm hoping we spend most of the time on the discussion. But some very grim statistics. So 63% of the adult population in the UK are obese. The picture is worse for children. So 30% of children aged between 2 and 15 are overweight. And by the time they hit years 10, 11, about 20%. So, this is a national problem that needs to be tackled. So in Hounslow, the picture is also pretty grim. So 61% of the population age 18 and over are seen to be overweight or obese. And again, with children, this picture is also not good. There is a link between deprivation and health. So sadly, the Heston, Hounslow and Bedford have the highest levels of obesity, whilst Chiswick, Turnham Green have much lower levels. So again, how do we learn as a system? What is happening in Chiswick that we need to take over to these other boroughs? Now, clearly, deprivation is an issue, but are there other things that we need to learn across the system? So I really hope this is a whole council learning and challenging experience. For our young people in Hounslow, at the age of 2, 18% of our children aged 4 to 5 are overweight. By years 10, 11, 38%. So, as people get older, they are getting obese quite quickly. This isn't something that happens in adulthood, but clearly adults who are obese probably do not look after their children necessarily in the way that they need to. So it's a whole journey through life approach that we need to tackle. So that's the negative news. The positive news is I do believe we can do things. I want us to be energized to do things. But we need to work as a whole system. So the one slide I do want to bring your attention to in your pack is slide 46, which just is that sort of picture of a whole council, but it's not a big enough picture. We need to make this bigger. We need to be more imaginative. But, you know, we need to start looking at young children, pregnant mothers first. How do we educate them to look after young children? How do we make sure that babies that are born are brought up and fed correctly from the start? How do we ensure that infants growing up are encouraged to exercise and eat well? And then how do we get people in adult life and older life to continue that journey of healthy eating, healthy exercise? We're doing things. So we're working to ensure that all mothers who are breastfeeding are given also special education on diets. We are reskilling families to advise them about budgeting, about food, about what is good to buy, what is good to eat. And we are promoting active lifestyles. But the level that we're doing this across Hounslow is at quite a low level. So how do we make this bigger? How do we make this sort of every contact count come to diet and exercise? So, as I said earlier, the pandemic has shown that obesity is a long-term health condition. People who often have obesity also have heart issues, have respiratory issues, have diabetes, etc. So it's not just the cost of being unhealthy. The whole cost on the health system on Hounslow is incredible in these health areas. So we need to challenge this, not just as a council, but the whole health system. And I'm a keen, passionate person to talk about integrated care and how we work across the whole system. What I'd really like us to think about now, we've had the recovery. Councillor Bidoff, I'm pleased you mentioned these three fit together. So the recovery programme, I encourage us always, when you're working on green recovery, what does green recovery mean to obesity and healthiness? When we're talking about economic recovery, what does it mean to the whole system and how we make our population more healthy? So really, that's all I'd like to say. The chair clearly set out the 4 questions we'd like you to answer, but really what I would like us to leave with a real view that I think the pandemic made us think about public health much more as a very important part of the council. And I hope that relationship with Kelly and the team continues going forward. And how do we become a public health council that makes our population fit, healthy, exercising well, eating well? Over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Atherton and Martin. I am very conscious of the time, so it is question time. However, if anybody doesn't have a question but would like to make a comment, suggestion, please feel free to do so. But could we stick to the 4 specific ones that were asked, please? Thank you. Councillor Javed Akhundzada.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, but just remarks, a couple of them. Martin have really identified and, rightly said that it's the whole system that we need to work around and to tackle this issue. Of course, the pandemic have identified this, and I think, I don't remember the exact amount, but it's a huge amount that NHS is actually spending to tackle this issue. But the more early we tackle that, it can save the system and also save the NHS the time and the resources. One thing, I mentioned that before in when we were talking about the green areas and the green parks and stuff, is that we need to motivate especially the children to participate more in sports. We can do that in school. I have gone through the slides and it is already mentioned there, but we need to do more on that. I just look at what difference it made, the London Olympics. After that, people are more into sports now. After the recent Olympics, Emma have 18 years old, what she have achieved in tennis. All these things motivate the young generation to take part in physical activities, especially in sports. But as a council, as a local authority, we also need to promote these events more, so that we can encourage our young in schools to if we can, if the financial, I don't know how it as a moment that if we can sponsor them for trainings and stuff like that, so they can get encouraged. And of course, make the parks attractive. I know that recently there were working going on in parks, but we need to make it more attractive, especially for the families, especially for the children, so that they can, rather than sitting at home playing on these gadgets nowadays, to be motivated to go there and encourage them to take part in outside activities. But then at the end, the most important thing, which Martin have touched on, is to educate people, not just the parents, but also the children in the school, just to tell them that, to educate them. And again, through our GPs and through the whole health system should be engaged to educate people how to tackle that and how we can improve our health, not just the obesity, but the other lifestyle we have to change, so that we can have a healthy population all over the country. And thank you very much for the report. I've gone through the report. It's very informative, and I think that even once you have more data, as you have said, that we will combine that with the other reports, so we will get more feedback from you guys to see how we can contribute, and how as a council or an as authority, what we can do to motivate people and tackle this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Akanzada. Councillor Bidoff?
Thank you, Chair. So I've got quite a few points to raise. I hope I can do it in my allotted time without running over. With the two maps that you've got, I wondered if you could plot where the schools are and where the open spaces are, because there might be direct links between those two things. I'm thinking about the low rate of obesity in the Chiswick wards, and this is not a political comment at all. It's the shape of the town, and wherever you are in it, you can get to something that encourages outdoor exercise. Ron and I, we've got 3 open spaces and a nature reserve in one ward, for example. That's going to make a huge difference in terms of how easy it is to go out for a bit of exercise. So it would be useful to know where we've got sort of open space deprivation and where the schools are. That would be helpful to know.
Sorry, Councillor Bidoff, just on page 39, there is the map of open space. It hasn't got the schools, but I agree with you. We are starting to look at that as a whole issue.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay, that would be great. Thank you. I don't know enough about schools, and I'm really sorry about this. I don't know what they're fed. What are the meals like? Is there a link there between what they're eating at school, particularly free school meals? I don't, and whether that has any correlation. We fell out of the habit way back when of taking your own food to work, for example, as an adult, and taking your own food to school. Wherever you are, and I'm on the obese scale, so I'm not speaking from anything other than personal experience on this. Do children take their own snacks? You see kids buying packets of crisps, packets of sweets, which of course we all do. But if you take your own food, you can make it much more healthy, potentially. Cheap foods, on the whole, quite unhealthy. I don't know if there's something around that can be done. The other thing I thought of really strongly was boredom sends you to food. And if you have a lot of things to do, you don't have that same inability to think, what do I do next, and reach into the fridge. I may be making some very irrelevant points, but I just think that those were the things that struck me. It's exercise is important, as you said. Exercise for me ended with school. We had it at school, and then the minute we left, there was nothing organized. And you go to work if you're lucky. Your commute might be the only exercise you get all week. If you've got a dog, you might go out walking, but those sorts of things. I think we need to look at the transition of what we do for people who leave schools. I agree with what you said about the interesting chart at the end. What I felt was that it was very organizationally structured and very instructive. You go to your hospital and you get some rules. You go to your pharmacist and you get some rules. I'm just going through pre-diabetes exercise myself for the second time, and I've got something quite creative on my wrist, which tells me whether or not I can have what I'm buying. It reads barcodes. It's probably hugely expensive. It's based on my DNA. Somebody has taken my blood and analyzed it, and you can't eat this, you can eat that. And then you point this at the barcode on the item, and you learn how little you can eat. But it's actually, when you're not wearing it, you're so much less conscious of it, and it's very easy. It's the same argument with plastics. You suspend I don't want to buy single-use plastics. When you reach for a packet of crisps, you don't make that connection. You buy the crisps and forget. Do you see what I mean? This when you're not wearing it, reduces your awareness. So I think we've got to look at this chart, have an extra aspect to it of what's cool. I used that word earlier. This isn't cool. What can we do to link with people who are at risk of becoming obese or who are obese in the community as well, beyond pharmacists and hospitals and dentists, where you get instructions? I'm not sure I've made myself coherently or been very coherent, but those were the things that struck me. And then with the questions at the beginning, to come back to the chairman's point about we've got to look at those 4 questions, I do have one to say about, 2 actually. How do we make more people walk in our green spaces? Well, speaking as an older person, you need loos, and there aren't any. Or if there are, they're awful. And I am going to talk about public loos in another context, but you really do need to have a decent loo. And if a cafe closes, you still need to have the loos, so they can't just be aligned with the cafes. And then how do we design space so people walk rather than drive? We need to know why they're driving. There might be some very valid reasons why they have to drive. And then you have to think, well, we accept that, but what about when you're not in your car? What can you do? So just some suggestions.
Thank you, Councillor Biddulph. Martin or Councillor Atherton, who's going to respond?
We probably both got some.
No,
Both of you.
Thank you. No, I think they're really good points and questions. To Councillor Akazada, I completely agree with you. Sort of opportunities for sport and leisure for young people is really important, and I constantly am aware of how much money I am able to afford and spend on my own children. My 12-year-old just last night has joined an athletics club. It's going to be £40 a month, and then you have to pay some sort of track fee. And I've signed him up that more for like confidence and mental health rather than, he's fit as a fiddle. Actually, he's incredible. But when it comes to his physical health, but and then my daughter's gymnastics is hundreds of pounds we pay every bi-monthly. We have to pay a gymnastic fee. So I think it's a really good point that we just have to keep pushing. Is that there has to be opportunities and accessibility. I do think things like the park run, there is things that are available and that are free. We provide things as a council in our parks, things that people can come along to. So it's really just making sure that people know about it, brought along, word of mouth, through a friend. I mean, it is a massive cycle of, you start getting fit and you feel better, so then you want to do more things. My own mum is just going through a really exciting getting fit in her 60s life stage, which we're all very happy about, because after the pandemic, we just glad that she's alive and want to keep her alive a lot longer. But so suddenly she's swimming and she's eating well and she wants to do more of it, but it's like getting that start is really, really hard. I think sport in school is really, really important. I think you make a really important point, Councillor Biddulph, around when school finishes, often sport finishes, and what we know for young women is actually usually secondary is often when sport finishes for girls as well. So we have been doing a lot of work to encourage girls to continue in sport and working closely with our schools where we can. We have got some big events next summer, which is going to be really exciting opportunity for us in Hounslow to really promote women's sport and sport for everybody and people getting involved in sport and culture. So that's exciting. As far as school food programs, since we've had sort of academisation and schools have a lot more autonomy, but we did have the wonderful Jamie Oliver, and so schools have had to be a lot more accountable for what they offer, and that's come from pressure from parents as well. So but it is from school to school. You will get some schools that will have a full kitchen providing fresh, cooked fresh food every day, and then other kitchens that might have frozen food that is warmed up and everything in between. I think from training that I have done, packed lunches tend to be a lot less healthy than what schools offer. So some schools I've actually taken away a packed lunch off for my two of my children in a school where you can't take a packed lunch. You have to have the school dinner, and that's a way of making sure that children are being provided with nutrition, and they also have healthy snacks. That particular school won't allow children to go to shop, and if they come out of school and go to sort of unhealthy shops, they get in trouble. And that's a tricky one as well, isn't it? You want them to have some amount of freedom, but they're children and they aren't always going to make good decisions for themselves. So they are discouraged from going into like junk food shops, and they can get in trouble for it. And the schools can also work with those companies and say, please don't try and attract our children to come in and eating unhealthy food. So there's lots of work, and obviously we would, as a council, support that work. I think you're absolutely right. Toilet infrastructure is hugely important. For our diverse communities, and for older people, for people with disabilities and conditions, etc., for women, when it comes to like periods, etc., after you've had a baby. So yeah, we can definitely continue to keep that on the agenda. And I think, yeah, I've probably just done sort of verbal, so I will pass over to Martin, who might put a bit more meat on the bones.
No more meat on the bone, but I think both councils are very helpful. I think one of the things that we really are now trying to do is to make sure that we are a listening council. We listen to our residents and find out why these are the issues. So those questions of why do people get in a car not walk, how do we get the answer? I ask for you as councillors, I'm really interested, how do we get more information about that? Real information for real spaces. I think there are some fantastic parks and green spaces in Hounslow, all over Hounslow. But when I go to them, they are quite empty. So we really need to understand why people don't use our green spaces more. And Councillor Bidoff, I would love you to send me the detail about that piece of equipment, because I've never heard of it. But those are the sort of things we need to do. So this is really an ask of the Public Health and Councillor Atherton coming and saying, as councillors, we really want you to start telling us how we can engage in this more. Kelly, the public health team, myself, Councillor Atherton, we're all passionate about this, but we do need insight about local areas, local communities. What is it that we need to do to make a difference? And any technology you're all wearing that can help, please share.
Is everybody agreeable to suspending standing orders? No? Thank you. Okay. By the way, there's great toilets in Osterley Park. Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. What I was going to touch on has already been spoken about, but I was just going to say, it seems like a lot of the work needs to be done at that early age, because, if you look at those, what it says in the slides, so younger generations are becoming obese at earlier ages and staying obese into adulthood. So if it's adulthood, so if it's tackled at that earlier age, it can just make the later stages a lot easier, and when you get to that stage. But yeah, so I was just wondering, and like I say, you already touched on it, but the relationship with schools and kind of just more information on what was done, what is being done to kind of create awareness and tackle this more at that earlier stage. So in childhood. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. But I know you've already spoken about it, but then if you've got anything else to add.
I think we put a lot of pressure on schools. So I would encourage us to look outside of schools. So lots of problems are about adults feeding their children the wrong food. So I like Councillor Bidoff's technology, because lots of people just don't know what to feed people anymore. So I think the question we need to ask is, how do we educate our population, our residents, to feed correctly? Now, I think there needs to be more work through faith groups, through local organisations, through places where our residents go. I think that's a much better way of educating people than through the council. But I'd again like to understand from your communities, where are the best places to educate people about food? It's really difficult, as you say. Packets of tea, it's tempting and easy, even though they're full of plastic. So we need to really make sure that we don't put this onto schools. It's a community adult issue. So we are working with health visitors. We are working with mothers. We are trying to do those things. But lots of mothers are influenced by their family and their grandparents. And so if I could ask you to be one thing, this isn't a school solution. It's a community whole system solution. And I would really encourage you to look elsewhere, because our schools are dealing with lots of children with mental health issues, a whole education backlog. I don't think we can help them solve the obesity problem as well.
Councillor Atherton, did you want to say something? Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to do a mention for our children's centres, we still have our children's centres. Things have been reduced since the heydays of all our Sure Start, the Sure Start programme, but the children's centres are still there, and everyone in the community can access that. If you've got a child who's 0 to 5, you should be able to have a medium to sort of short to medium walk to get to your nearest children's centre, where there's so much on offer as far as people who can, nutritionists who can come along and tell you about what is good to feed your child, etc., and breastfeeding support. And so there really is support in the communities. It's just getting people along to those things, and people do access them.
Thank you. You're right. There are so many parts to this obesity issue, and you are right. It is not just dependent on the schools. It's as parents, and it's just for a lot of parents. If you're on low incomes, it's so much easier to pop into Iceland or out, and buy chips and fish fingers, and if you've got to feed 3 or 4 children daily, and also for a lot of the parent, or especially the mothers, not being sexist, they're still working. It's quick. So a lot of people just feel that they don't have the time to make fresh chips, or so a lot of issues actually. Councillor Lal.
Chair, there's not much to be said that hasn't already been covered. However, I would like some clarification. I mean, I get the bit that you just said about lay off the schools. Yeah, it's about other stuff outside in the community, but I think that's already happening. I mean, places of worship, on TV, you've got celebrities cooking up really good meals, etc., healthy meals. So that information is already out there, and we can carry on doing that. But I firmly believe that it's early intervention, like Councillor Chowdhury had said earlier. And can you tell me, I mean, again, I'm a bit removed from this, do we still have schools doing inter-school football matches, netball matches, badminton matches, or regionally, West London region? When I was growing up, that's what we used to be doing quite a lot of. Do schools do that activity still? And if not, why not? And is there something that we can do to encourage that kind of activity?
Martin?
No, yes, they do. And earlier there were some young people in the reception having their photograph taken because they've been Hounslows won some intersport football tournament. So they definitely do. Clearly, COVID made it more difficult. So I think the challenge always is children who like exercise and get into all the team sports and do very well. It's always that problem, isn't it? It's the people who don't like exercise, and it's the ones who aren't so good, aren't encouraged. So I think those things do happen, and I think if we looked at the statistics, there'd still be 20% very fit, very healthy, going to all the swimming clubs, doing all the. But we need to look at the last 20% who are the big challenge to us, who don't like exercising, like eating poor food. They're the challenge, who will have long-term health conditions before they're 18 and will live the whole of their lives in that place. And I think it's really how we motivate those people, how we redesign our leisure services to focus on not the gym goers who enjoy it, but the people who really find it a struggle. But so there is a lot of very good, active people in Hounslow who compete and win.
Is that it, Councillor Lal? Thank you. Councillor Mishisho?
Thank you, Chair. Speaking as a declaration of interest, I'm a PE teacher. So health for us is the state of physical, mental, and social well-being. And that's what we try to promote as school teachers. So I think the physical bit is what when we talk about obesity is the bit that we're probably covering most. So I'm always a bit conflicted when I see things like CB Hanslow struggling to get the support of the council when they're trying to actually promote sports for all in their community. So we need to be more supportive of sports clubs, and we need to be, as Councillor Akinzada said, we need to be more supportive of school sports. And Councillor Rao also mentioned it as well just recently. If we can, as a council, promote those school sports, not just for the elite, the A teams or whatever, but throughout the year groups, all the primary school kids, they all have an A, B, and C team. Somehow, if the state can be involved in that, I think that would be good use of council resource there. That's for that bit. As a Conservative, I don't mind the state being involved in that sort of situation, because at the end of the day, we know that obesity affects those especially from Africa and Southeast Asia, as we've seen that with COVID. If we can tackle that at the beginning, then we're doing half the job there for the NHS as well. So in order for us to do that, I think we need, yes, education, but we've been educating for years and years and years about diets and so on. But it's about working in partnership with parents. So when I work in school and I'm talking about sports, I'm always trying to make sure that the parents are on board with us. You can't give a message to a child that the parent's not aware of. So as a council, again, as a state, perhaps the conversation is, how do we get our messages out? I mean, we do write to, every single door in London Borough of Hounslow. Can we write to every single parent in London Borough of Hounslow and tell them how important it is that their child's health is taken seriously at home as well as at school? The third point is you've mentioned, Martin, that there is quite a few, you're opening your arms out there to organizations that are there to help. I'm currently liaising with a group called Super Life Fusion, who are campaigning to educate people from ethnic minority backgrounds about how to make healthy snacks. So they're looking at, as we speak, they're looking at having a session opposite the Wellington Road South Centre and a Chiswick Hogarth Youth Centre, to try and bring these young people from smaller backgrounds, ethnic minority backgrounds, to teach them how to cook healthy snacks like cakes and so on. And that's something that the council, actually, a council officer is actually talking to them at the moment. But I would like to actually put them in touch with you as well, because that's something I think that potentially there's something there for us, not just for that company, but for other associations who are willing to be practical about teaching people how to cook a diet, a good nutrition. And my final point is to do with the point that was raised originally by the leader of the council about this £20 voucher. Not every single person is going to claim this £20 voucher, because not every single person, as I've showed with my emails, I've described in my emails, not every single person feels that they can use this to their advantage as end users. Therefore, we're going to have a surplus of this £2 million left over. Couldn't we not use that money to get to personal trainers and sports professionals to come into schools and to go into our local parks and to give this personal exercise programs out in the parks? I can imagine now, I can see it right now, some 40-year-olds in the park doing exercises, being cheered on by a personal trainer who has been paid, I don't know, 4 of these vouchers for an hour. Those are 4 vouchers that are being wasted, that someone in Chiswick who's written to me doesn't want to use them. Can we put them to someone who can actually promote healthy lifestyle to a group of 40-year-olds in a park? And lastly, there are organizations also, such as Richmond Rugby Club, whom I've worked with in the past, who do offer sessions for 4 to 6-year-olds. They offer sessions for 6 to 18-year-olds, sessions for 30 to 40-year-olds, sessions for 50 plus year olds, walking rugby or walking activity of some form. That's enrichment. But they've extended their reach to Hounslow, and they've emailed us as councillors in Hounslow to reach out. How can we get that message to the doorsteps of our residents? Because Twitter is not enough. I can't do that. We need to be doing that through our publications. If I received a letter of £20 voucher in my doorstep, we can certainly send a letter to this individual and say, look, here's what's happening in terms of physical activities. Here's what's happening in terms of personal trainers. Here's what's happening in terms of educating our children how to cook a good meal. And here's what's happening in terms of inter-school sports that you should be supporting as a parent, because we are a partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mashisha. Councillor Atherton.
Thank you. As far as the voucher scheme, I mean, I think some of your suggestions, could hold some weight as far as what does the community want? How do they want to be helped to be more fit? But we have got a lot of programs that happen in our parks, happen at our leisure centre, things at the leisure centre for older people, for example, are subsidised and are more affordable. So there is lots going on. But I take your point around communication. I think you're absolutely right. We can't always do direct mails, which are expensive, but we can use what we've already got. We could do more advertising through Hounslow Matters, etc. So we could see what goes out as far as what's available at our leisure centres, or here's the website, go online and find out what's happening there. The other point about the vouchers is that money specifically came to the council to support business, so I think it wouldn't be able to be used in the way that you'd like it to be used. But yeah, there is other funds. Any organisation that wants to do, for example, what you were saying about helping young people eat healthily, they can apply to our community. We've got 3 pots of funding in our community services. So people, if they want to do those sort of things, we can support them. We can provide funding if they apply. We can put things in place to support them to deliver that good work. So I think the other thing is a lot of the stuff is happening, and we are doing it, and that's why this is going to be a whole system approach. We've also got our social prescribing team that are working with our GPs, and they're when people are coming to the GP and saying this is what they're struggling with, and the GP can get them a social prescriber who can say, have you thought about this walking and talking group? And we have got these things in the borough, but I think I always feel like I learn about things and think, oh, well, now I know about this. How do we make sure that all our residents know about this? So I definitely think we could improve our communication, but lots of these things are already there.
Thank you. Councillor Tuck and then Councillor Bidoff.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm going to go back to the school part. Yes, the school lunches that schools provide, there is one part in those lunches called pudding, which in my opinion is not necessary for kids. We are developing a habit in the kids from a very young age that it is necessary to have pudding as part of your meal. I don't see it necessary. We are giving them a choice. You have to have sweet with your food. That encourages obesity.
Agreed, but you really, as a school kid, I used to love my pudding. Cherry tart, the best.
Yeah, there is. There's beetroot cakes and things. Now they have to show how there is some nutritional value. Then they're not just giving them like strawberry ice cream.
And the second point, most of the time when the school ends, you go outside the school and you'll find an ice cream truck parked just outside the school, and kids will start screaming they want an ice cream, and the parents who are in hurry, they will have no other choice than, okay, just have it and let's go. So can we do something to stop that, those parking those ice cream trucks just outside the school? when the kids are leaving the school. And third thing, we have our leisure centers. Have you ever compared the subscription that you need to pay in our leisure center to access the gyms as compared to other normal gyms which are available?
Councillor Atherton.
On that, I don't know the answer, but I would imagine leisure have made some of those comparisons.
No, I am told that our leisure services are of a reasonable cost. I think with all of these things, it's, if you join and then you don't use it, it's not a reasonable cost. If you join and you use it regularly, it's very reasonable. So, you know, we are starting to look into this more. We're working very closely with leisure services, and the things you're raising are things we are looking at. But I'm told our gyms are well used, and if they're well used, they're good value for money.
Okay, I can tell for a fact that the leisure center which I go to for my daughter's swimming is not well used, which is in Henwood Park on Uxbridge Road, the Henwood Park Leisure Center. And the prices are over £50 a month to access the gym and swimming pool facilities. If you go to a normal gym in that area, it is usually about £20 a month. The gym group, exercise for less, these are normally £20 a month. Whereas our leisure center, it's over £50 a month. How is that encouraging people to come and exercise? It's general. If you want to go and access just the gym, you can't. No, if you want to go and access just the gym, you can't. You have to have the membership.
Councillor, if you want us to look into the cost of our gyms, we can do that, but we don't have the detail here today. But usually with a gym, you can either pay for the gym and the swimming, but if you want to use the swimming, you have to pay the monthly amount, and it is more than just a gym. So they're not two comparable things if you're looking at a gym and swimming and just gyms.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, can't we separate these two and can provide just a gym membership, which is comparable with other gyms? Well, maybe I've had different experience. I go there every Sunday.
That's my local leisure centre as
Yeah.
well. I don't go there that regularly, but I do remember when we had a government that allowed children to swim for free, and I would absolutely love that to come back, because I think free swimming definitely meant that more children swam, and now swimming, you know, children, it's not that expensive, but the parents have to pay to go along with them, and I think that just put people off. So I would definitely welcome a government that would provide free swimming to all our children.
Are they not doing swimming at schools anymore? Obviously, shows haven't been for years, but
They definitely do swimming at some schools. I don't know if it's
most schools I thought did. Yeah,
but again, it's
Yeah,
down to the
of course.
individual schools,
of course.
and the parents have to pay towards.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Bidoff and then Councillor Foote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the vouchers point, which was raised earlier, you can spend it on health and wellbeing businesses. That is one of the categories that they're allowed to be spent on. And Brentford Leisure Centre has signed up. So I assume all the council centres have signed up. But what there isn't, and I think it's a victim of the scheme rather than us, is there really wasn't any information about it when the voucher went out. You weren't really advised on how you could spend it, and that could have been improved, possibly. Well, it could have been improved. So that's something. And maybe an article in Hounslow Matters of where to spend your vouchers would be useful, because some of the leisure activities are about 20 quid or some of them less. In Chiswick, I know a yoga studio has signed up. Well, yoga's much too expensive for some people to do. And so is a Pilates studio, and that's also unaffordable for many. So, and I don't think the £20 would encourage them to spend it in that way anyway, because they'd have to make it up. But there might be something you can do in Hounslow Matters to explain exactly what you can spend your voucher on. It doesn't have to go on shopping, for example. And then just a couple of other points that have come to me during the discussion. There's no mention of eating disorders, which I thought was really rather interesting. Eating too much is an eating disorder. So perhaps we need to look at that in a different way, not in a ticking people off way. And the other thing is, I've been down to my last pound. I've been down to my last £2. And when you're in that situation, you sort of want a treat. And the trouble is, the treat is the chip shop. And it's getting past that. And maybe there is something that we can do as a council about how to spend your last pound more creatively on food that would sustain you. I don't know to what extent that might be possible, but you may not want to buy another six eggs because you're sick of eggs. That's all you've been able to afford up till that point. But I just think something that feeds into, we understand your plight, but the chip shop isn't your friend. Perhaps. I know it's hard to get them for £2 in Chiswick. I can tell you that it's £2.50. But if when you're that desperate, you will actually throw your last pound at something that feels a little bit more of a treat. And then just one more point. Sorry, Ron. If you're fat, it's really uncomfortable exercising, or it can be, or else it's embarrassing. And, I've had many people, I learned to swim at the same time as I learned to walk. I've always been a water baby. But you don't want to be seen in a swimming costume, even though people say to you, but if you were to swim, all of that, it's a chicken and egg situation. But I don't know if there's something we can do to help people get over that uncomfortableness and embarrassing point. Thank you. That's it.
Councillor Atherton.
Thank you, Councillor Biddulph. I wanted to come back to your first point, and I think I don't think it was eating disorders. It was something else. But I'll come back to you. Oh, I'm going to forget everything that you've just said now.
Hounslow Matters and writing an article about what you can spend the pound.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a great idea. If it isn't already in the pipeline, I know that I've been preparing what I'm going to tweet about what I spend mine on. I still haven't spent it, but my one little tweet might not go as far as Hounslow Matters. So yeah, I think any communication about just making sure people really know how they can spend it would be really, really useful. But there's something else that's just gonna have gone.
Being fat and uncomfortable?
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. So I know for me, the most time that I was regular at the gym and really enjoyed the gym was my sort of A-level years. I went a few times a week. But being in a women's changing room at a gym that's just used by regular people was the best thing ever for my mental health, for my viewing women's bodies and all the different shapes and sizes, and all the women who were quite happy to be very on display where I was there with my towel and a complete prude was such a positive thing. So I think it is getting over it, but I think once people are in that space and seeing that actually people are swimming of all different shapes and sizes, and is there opportunities for campaigns? You don't see that. Oh, I see that, and I think, wow, that's amazing. But
that's what put me off.
Yeah, I wonder if you might have to come and swim in some different places, maybe. But maybe we could do like Loose Women do and do some big billboards of all the councillors in swimwear.
I don't think so. Right, Councillor Mashish, if we could have that quickly, please.
Yeah, just a quick one.
Foot.
Yeah, Councillor Atherton says that in response to my initial comments were that a lot of things are happening. And I think that therefore that we need to communicate better. That's the solution. If a lot of things are happening, people don't know about it. So maybe from us to you is let's communicate that a lot better. The one thing in terms of the questions that you raised with the committee, the answer to how do we make more people walk in our green spaces, you know what? Keep them clean. And if we are more proactive about cleaning our green spaces, and I've seen many times the Hounslow Highways truck people, every day, bless them, they do their best. It's not enough. We're still littering as residents. We keep littering our parks, and sometimes it takes 3 or 4 days for them to come back again because they're sick and tired of doing the same job over and over again. Can we police that better? Can we find those people? Can we actually put those take them to account on that? So clean our parks. How do we encourage people to walk more and drive less? Well, they have to drive to work, but keep our streets clean. I think that's another thing. Just cleanliness will help to improve our population's health. So I think if we can put that at the forefront of our agenda, just cleaner parks, cleaner roads, cleaner green spaces, I think that will encourage us to be more proactive and more active.
Councillor Atherton.
Yeah. Yep. I think again we have programs of cleaning, but I think there is always more that we can be done. Myself and Martin talk a lot about the parks that I use, and I challenge myself to be a lot more local. And some of the reasons that I drive to a park sometimes rather than walking is around like infrastructure. I don't feel like when I cycle with my kids to a local park, it doesn't feel that safe. I'd like to have better cycle routes for them to get there. I think you're right about the driving to work. We've had the pandemic, people are working from home a lot more now. So I think that means that people potentially could walk the school run instead of drive because they're not going off to a different workplace. So I think some of the other things that are happening in the different departments will also mean that we can have this whole system approach. And also, what do you do when you get to the last few pounds on a much wider scale of things? We're talking about the recovery. We want to make sure that our residents aren't getting down to their last few pounds every week, that they've got a lot more money in their pockets at the end of the week because they're doing the reskilling and they're going and they're doing further education run, so I think we are really recognizing that this is a whole council approach, to improve people's health and well-being. It is, we've asked these specific questions around walking and using leisure, but we also recognize that we need to we've talked about deprivation. One of the biggest reasons is people are stressed, people are depressed, people have developed eating disorders related to lots of other mental health issues, and so they're not taking care of themselves and their children in the way that they maybe could if some of that was alleviated. So yeah, I really feel like our ambition is here and it's part of even a much wider council agenda, and you can hold us account to it.
Thank you, Councillor Atherton. Finally, Councillor Foote, if you have any questions, or if you have no questions but just some points, or perhaps you would like to propose the motion if you feel it's all been covered.
I've got a few points to make, as you would probably realise. Yeah, I mean, you may not believe this. I'm sure you probably wouldn't believe it, but until I was 21, I actually weighed 9.5 stone. I was a real stick insect. And that may be the product of a whole load of things, but I was very, very active. I played football, I played cricket, I did athletics, I cycled everywhere. There wasn't a lot of options really, but that's what you did do. You cycled, went to school in Feltham, and I lived in Hamworth. That was quite a long cycle ride. So all of those things, and I was really quite skinny, playing football and everything else right up until till I was in my mid-20s, and then I suffered a very serious football injury, which wrecked my knee completely, to the point now I have a prosthetic knee. But I think that one of the things that this, and I look down here about the different, I look at some of the bullet points. There's a group missing, and the group is people with who are, have disabilities. How do they exercise? Do we actually concentrate? What exactly can somebody like I've got? Well, now this morning, I went with my two councillor colleagues, Councillor Atherton and Councillor Chowdhury, and we walked around the bridle path in Hamworth. I would doubt whether there's very many people in this room actually know that there are bridle paths in Hamworth, because that's been our problem. But we went around there this morning because we're trying to get them improved. So, not only horses could go around there, but also people that can walk around there and get some exercise. And it's a good couple of miles walk around there. My point is that having done that, and I came back and I was in agony for the rest of the day, and I'm stuffing painkillers and such, just in order to be able to come here this evening. I mean, I was here with, when I arrived here, I'm still got quite a bit of pain, but I mean, it's those sort of things that, we've got people that are, I'm not unusual. There are many people that because of their disabilities cannot exercise, and it's trying to find ways and means that try and get them into that situation that we can help. I mean, and the other thing about food, my wife is forever telling me now that I don't eat as much food as I used to. My weight doesn't go down. I can tell you, going from 9.5 stone, my weight now is somewhere just above 21 stone. So, I've increased quite considerably over that time. But my wife says that I don't eat anything like that I used to eat. I don't know. I suppose I don't really. No, I don't eat a lot, but I don't lose weight either. It stays pretty flat at that point. So again, it's people that are in that situation where exercise is not right, and it's not necessarily just food. I mean, when I grew up, we ate very healthily. We grew our vegetables. I mean, a bit of history, but really, my father was a military policeman based in Palestine at the end of the war. And when he came back, he only survived a year and then died. So my mother then brought up myself and my two brothers, but we all had jobs. And my job was to prepare the vegetables that we picked out of the garden. So when my mother came home from work, she could cook the meal, but I had to do all the vegetables prepare. So I can tell you everything there is about peeling potatoes and shelling peas and all of that sort of thing. I've done the lot. So all of those things are there, and they contribute to, the way I was in those days, but not the way I am today. So I think really just, sort of, I think we should try and see if we things, not necessarily for me, but to have some sort of way in which we can focus on how do disabled people manage to get exercise, because it seems to be a bit of a forgotten group. The other thing I did notice on the map, you will notice in Hamworth that there is one area there which is very, very nice light pink, which if I look at the numbers, it says that it's 21 to 35 per thousand. The only thing is that little bit that's light pink, the reason it's light pink is because nobody lives there. It's all owned by Thames Water. And it's fenced in, so that's why there's not many obese people in that area. Yes. So, yes. Sorry. Yeah. You want me to
propose a
move
motion?
on? Yeah.
Please.
Okay. I forgot about the history lessons. Right. Yeah. I don't know where to go on it really, but I mean, I think that Councillor Atherton certainly has her finger on this, and I appreciate what she said, and it shows that she is passionate and thinks about these things, and I know she is, because as I say, she's my fellow councillor in Hamworth, so I know how she treats things and people with passion. So from that, I would, really, I suppose we're asking to note the report with thanks, I think, for the activities to put on. But yes, let's learn some lessons, and what we have is not the end of the trail. We need to move on and move forward. But I think that I appreciate that what is being done there, but we can do better. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Foote. Can we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bidoff. Shall we go to the vote? Everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Finally, thank you very much, Martin and Councillor Atherton, and for sitting here all this time. You are free to go. Finally now, I would like to draw the committee's attention to this letter from Ofsted following a visit by the inspectorate in July. We all have a role in ensuring London Borough of Hounslow serves the children of the borough well. And I would urge members to read and understand the letter that was received by Stephen Forbes last month. As members will see, the letter is just for noting. And I would ask if anybody has any questions or any comments, please forward them to Dr. Probert, who will definitely respond to you all. So for now, we just need to note the letter. So I may ask all the members to do so. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Sorry, I was just going to say,
yes.
just
Isn't this supposed to be not public, or because this is being obviously recorded?
Yeah.
Does the public should they be aware of the letter?
I think it has been published. I think it has been published now.
The letter is published through the agenda item, but it's also on the Ofsted website, so it's publicly accessible to anybody who cares to access it.
Okay.
I think the point that I was going to make is that's another really an example of when it should have been in our papers, not just available via link. Do you see what I mean? It's just all we've got is the report saying there's a letter.
Just to say, I've been privy to that letter because I sit on the overview. Sorry, on the corporate parenting, and it's a very serious letter of an incident. Obviously, I can't say any further because I don't know how much the public are aware of it. But are we not able to discuss it as overview and scrutiny?
I don't think that's the issue contained in that letter. The issue in that letter sets out a visit that took place in the council in July, rather than I believe the other.
Is that okay, everybody? We are at the end. I would like to thank each and every person here tonight and all of the committee members. I feel we've had a really productive evening. There have been some really good suggestions from both sides. And, apart from the beginning, which was a little perhaps dicey, I think we've had a really good, productive evening. So thank you to everybody. Are there any other matters that anybody considers urgent? No, just to let you all know that the next meeting will be held on November the 9th. So thank you all and good evening.
Thank you, Chair.
See you later, Rachel. We'll talk. Thank you for everything. Yes, you go. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, good.